I was 33 years old, standing in a custom wedding dress that had taken 6 fittings, 3 months, and more emotional courage than I wanted to admit. My bridesmaids kept telling me I looked calm, like calm was the same thing as happy, but my hands were freezing around my bouquet, and I kept looking through the glass doors of the bridal suite toward the ceremony lawn, searching for two people who should have been impossible to miss. My parents' seats were empty. Not running late, empty. Actually empty. Front row, left side, two white chairs tied with satin ribbon with calligraphed cards that said, Mother of the Bride and Father of the Bride. Untouched. Waiting. Like fools. The wedding was at a botanical garden outside Chicago. White roses lined the aisle. A string quartet played under the trees. Late afternoon light made everything look soft, expensive, and blessed. Guests were already turning around, whispering, Maybe traffic? One bridesmaid said. I nodded, even though I knew better. My parents were never late for things that made them look important. They were early for charity luncheons, church fundraisers, and neighborhood events where they wanted people to know their daughter had paid for the wine. But my wedding? My wedding could apparently wait. I pulled my phone from beneath my veil and called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring, irritated before she even said hello. Behind her voice, I heard music, people talking, and a cheerful announcement about financing options. Mom, I whispered, because somehow I was still worried about embarrassing her. Where are you? There was a pause. Not surprise, not guilt, just inconvenience. Ava, lower your voice, she said. I can barely hear you. My ceremony starts in 10 minutes. I know when your ceremony starts. Then where are you and Dad? Another pause. Then she sighed, long and theatrical, the way she did when she wanted me to understand I had exhausted her simply by existing. We are with Chloe. My stomach tightened. Is she okay? Is she in the hospital? No, she is not in the hospital, my mother snapped. But she is having a very serious emotional crisis. And frankly, I am disappointed you did not think about how today would affect her. I looked at the empty chairs again. How my wedding would affect her. She feels overshadowed, Ava. Everyone has been talking about you for weeks. The dress, the venue, your company, your perfect fiancé. Do you know how hard that is for your sister? For a second, I could not speak. Somewhere outside, the quartet moved into a sweeter song, one I had chosen because my mother once said it made her cry. Mom, I said carefully, I am getting married. And not everything has to be about you just because you paid for a big party. That was the moment something inside me cracked, but it did not break loudly. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I just stood there in a room full of perfume and white flowers, realizing my mother could make even my wedding day sound like an act of selfishness. I had spent years trying to become the kind of daughter they could not dismiss. I built North Star Data Systems from a 2-desk office into a company investors actually returned calls for. I worked 16-hour days, slept under my desk during the first year, and still sent my parents $5,000 every month. $5,000 every month. I told myself it was gratitude. They told me it was duty. I paid their medical bills, vacations, groceries, social lifestyle, and the house they lived in. My father had refinanced it so many times the numbers stopped making sense. So 3 years before my wedding, I paid it off. He cried when I did it. My mother hugged me in front of the bank representative. I pretended that meant love. That had always been my talent, pretending. When I was 7, my birthday party was canceled because Chloe had a stomach ache. When I was 12, I won a math competition. And my father told me not to brag because Chloe was sensitive about school. When I was 16, I got my first job, and my mother called me so independent, in the same tone other mothers used for so difficult. Chloe was delicate. Chloe was special. Chloe needed softness. I needed to understand. The only time they praised me was when I gave them something: money, time, forgiveness, silence. And there I was. On the one day, I had allowed myself to want something without apologizing for it, still waiting for them to choose me. Ava, my mother said sharply. Are you listening? I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked beautiful. I looked expensive. I looked like a woman who had won. But my eyes looked like the same girl who used to sit at the top of the stairs, listening to her parents comfort Chloe for the pain of not being the center of attention. Yes, I said. I'm listening. Good. Then do not make this harder than it needs to be. We will come to the reception if Chloe feels stable enough. Stable. That word landed strangely. At the time, I thought she was just being cruel. Later, I would understand she was planting language, teaching people what words to associate with me before I even knew I was on trial. But in that moment, I only heard my mother telling me that my sister's jealousy outranked my marriage. Tell Dad I called, I said. He is busy handling things. Of course he is, my mother's voice cooled. Do not start, Ava. For once, I did not apologize. I ended the call and stood still for so long my maid of honor touched my arm. What happened? I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect my parents from the truth, even while they were humiliating me. But Nathan was waiting at the end of the aisle. My guests were waiting. My life was waiting. And my parents were somewhere with Chloe, surrounded by showroom music, making me feel guilty for noticing their absence. So I opened my banking app. My thumb shook as I entered my password. Not from fear of technology or money, from conditioning. From 33 years of believing that saying no to my parents made me cruel. I went to the supplementary credit card under my father's name, the one he used for emergencies, which somehow included bourbon, steakhouse dinners, and Chloe's sponsored-looking photo shoots. The lock button glowed beside the account. I stared at it. I know it sounds small. I know people hear that and think, you locked a card, not burned down a kingdom. But for me, that tiny button might as well have been a courthouse, a funeral, and a declaration of independence all in one. My whole life, I had been trained to keep the money flowing so the love might eventually come back. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I pressed lock. A simple confirmation appeared. Card frozen. I exhaled like I had been underwater for years. The coordinator appeared in the doorway, pale and careful. Ava, I'm so sorry, but we really do need to begin. I slipped the phone into my maid of honor's hand. We're starting. Are you sure? She asked. I looked once more at the two empty chairs in the front row. The little cards were still there. Mother of the bride, father of the bride. Titles they had wanted for the photographs, not for the responsibility. Yes, I said. I'm sure. The doors opened. Everyone stood. For half a second, I almost waited. Some foolish part of me still imagined my father rushing in, breathless and ashamed, offering me his arm. But the aisle was empty except for me. No father, no mother, no apology, so I walked. The first few steps hurt so badly I thought my knees might give out. Some people smiled, not knowing. Some noticed the empty seats and looked away too quickly. The quartet played the song my mother was supposed to love. My dress whispered over the stone path. And with every step, something shifted. No one gave me away. No one had to. Nathan stood beneath the floral arch in a dark suit, his face softening the moment he saw me. He did not look confused. He looked like a man who understood something had been taken from me and refused to make me explain it in public. When I reached him, he held out his hand. I took it like solid ground. "Are you okay?" he murmured. "No," I whispered back, "but I'm here." His thumb brushed my knuckles. "Then we do this together." The officiant began speaking, but I barely heard the first words. I was realizing, with a grief so sharp it almost became freedom, that I did not need my parents' permission to become someone's wife. I did not need my father's arm to cross into my own life. I did not need my mother's approval to be worthy of being loved. When I said my vows, my voice shook only once. When Nathan said his, he looked at me like I was not difficult, not selfish, not too independent, not too much, just chosen. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the guests clapped so loudly it covered the hollow place in the front row, at least for a moment. I smiled for photographs. I cut the cake. I danced with my husband under strings of garden lights. I laughed when people expected me to laugh, because Nathan's hand at the small of my back reminded me I was no longer standing alone. But my phone kept vibrating inside my maid of honor's clutch. Again and again and again. I did not look until later. I thought locking that card was just me setting one boundary. I had no idea it would expose the entire criminal mess my family had been hiding behind my name. For the first hour after the ceremony, I survived on pure momentum. That is the only way I know how to explain it. People hugged me, kissed my cheek, told me the ceremony was beautiful, told me Nathan looked at me like I was the only woman alive. I smiled until my jaw ached. I thanked everyone for coming. I held my bouquet in one hand and Nathan's hand in the other, like if I let go of either one, I might fall apart in front of 200 people. The reception was supposed to be the happiest part of the day. The garden had been transformed after sunset, with long tables under clear tents, candles floating in glass bowls, white roses spilling from gold vases, and little lights hanging from the trees like captured stars. I had paid attention to every detail because some foolish part of me wanted my parents to walk in and feel proud, not of the wedding, exactly, of me. Instead, every time I saw their empty places at the family table, I felt a cold little pinch behind my ribs. Nathan never pushed me to talk. That was one of the reasons I married him. He knew the difference between silence and avoidance. He knew when to stand close and when to let me breathe. During cocktail hour, he kept his hand at my waist, steady and warm, and quietly redirected every person who asked where my parents were. "They had a family emergency," he said, calm as ever. "A family emergency." I almost laughed every time he said it. My sister's jealousy had been promoted to a family emergency. By the time dinner started, I had almost convinced myself I could make it through the night without looking at my phone. I had already locked my father's credit card. I had already walked myself down the aisle. I had already said vows in front of people who loved me enough to show up. That should have been enough. Then my maid of honor leaned close and whispered, "Ava, your phone keeps ringing. It's your dad." She did not look annoyed. She looked worried. That was how I knew it was bad. I took the phone from her under the table. 11 missed calls from my father, 4 from my mother, 2 from Chloe. A string of texts filled the screen, each one angrier than the last. "Call me now." "What did you do?" "You embarrassed me." "Unlock the card." "You think this is funny?" I stared at the words until they blurred slightly. Nathan saw my face change. "You don't have to answer," he said. "I do," I whispered. "Because if I don't, He'll keep calling all night. Nathan's eyes moved over the room. Do you want me to come with you? I looked at the dance floor where our guests were laughing beneath soft amber lights. I looked at the wedding cake I had not even cut yet. Then I looked at my husband, who had already been more present for me in 2 hours than my parents had been in 3 decades. No, I said, but stay close. I stepped outside the tent into the cooler evening air and answered the next call. My father did not say hello. What the hell is wrong with you? He shouted. I flinched even though I hated myself for it. That was the thing about growing up with a father like Victor Sinclair. Even as an adult woman who employed more than 100 people, even wearing a wedding ring and a dress that cost more than my first car, his voice could still make my body remember being a child. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low, I'm at my reception. I know exactly where you are. You think I don't know? You think I don't know? You did this on purpose? Did what? He made a sound of disgust. Don't play stupid with me. My card was declined. For a moment, I just stood there watching moths bump gently against the lanterns. Your card, I repeated. Yes, my card. The one you froze like a spoiled little brat having a tantrum. It's my card, I said. My voice sounded strange to me, too calm, too steady. It is under my account. You are an authorized user. Do you know what you did? He barked. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? In front of a sales manager, in front of people. Something ugly and bright began to rise in my chest. Where are you? Silence. Dad, I said, slower now. Where are you? He huffed. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. Another pause. Then he said, We are at a dealership. A dealership. The word was so absurd, so insulting, so perfectly Sinclair that for a second I thought I had misheard him. You missed my wedding, I said. To go to a dealership? Do not twist this. What dealership? Ava. What dealership? A Porsche dealership, he snapped. And before you start your judgmental nonsense, your sister needed this. I closed my eyes. There it was. The serious emotional crisis. The reason my mother had abandoned her front row seat. The reason my father had not walked me down the aisle. The reason my family had looked at the most important day of my life and decided it was negotiable. Chloe wanted a Porsche, not even a used sedan, not a rental car after an accident, not transportation to a job interview or a medical appointment, a Porsche. What kind? I asked quietly. What? What kind of Porsche was worth missing my wedding? My father exhaled hard through his nose. A Macan. Chloe has a major rebrand coming up. She has sponsors watching. She cannot show up looking like she is struggling just because you decided to turn your wedding into some ridiculous display. My wedding made Chloe feel poor? You are being cruel on purpose. No, I said. I am asking a question. You have no idea what it is like for her sake, he said. Everyone comparing her to you. Everyone talking about your company and your house and your perfect little life. She needed a confidence boost. A $20,000 confidence boost? He went quiet. That was how I knew the number was right. The down payment was $20,000? I asked. She was going to pay it back. With what job? Ava, he warned. No, seriously, with what job? Her lifestyle page? The discount codes? The fake brand partnerships where she buys the products herself and pretends they were gifted? You have always been jealous of her. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. I was jealous of Chloe? Yes, because she has softness. People like her. She does not walk into every room acting like a man in heels. That one landed. He knew it would. My father had always known exactly where to hit. When I was building North Star, he called me aggressive. When investors finally took me seriously, he called me cold. When I bought my first apartment, he asked why I needed to live alone like I was proving something. But every time I sent money, he took it. I was getting married today, I said. Your wedding was one day, your sister's mental health is more important. I pressed my free hand against my stomach. You are saying that out loud. I am saying what a good sister should already understand. You owe this family. There it was again. Oh, not love, not gratitude, not relationship. Debt. I worked 3 jobs in college, I said. Do you remember that? I worked in the library, I tutored freshmen, and I took weekend shifts at a restaurant so I could afford books. Chloe got designer coats and a spring break trip because she was sad after a breakup. Chloe never had your advantages. My advantages? I almost whispered. You mean the ones I paid for myself? You got lucky with that business. I looked through the tent wall and saw Nathan standing near the entrance, watching me without interrupting. His face was calm, but his eyes were alert. Unlock the card, my father said. No. The word came out before fear could stop it. He went silent. I had said no to him before, but not like that. Not without explaining, not without softening, not with witnesses nearby and money on the line. What did you say? He asked. I said no. You are emotional. I am clear. You are punishing your sister because you cannot stand seeing her happy. No. I am cutting off access to my money because you tried to spend $20,000 on my wedding day without asking me. You are making a mistake. I have made plenty, I said. Paying for your life while you treated me like an inconvenience was one of them. His breathing changed. He was angry now, but beneath the anger, I heard something else. Panic. That gave me courage. The $5,000 monthly transfer stops immediately, I said. My father did not speak. The credit cards are permanently locked. I am removing you as an authorized user. I will no longer pay for Chloe's lifestyle, your vacations, your dinners, your emergencies, or anything else you decide I owe you. You little... Careful, I said. I do not know where that came from. Maybe from the woman who had walked herself down the aisle. Maybe from the girl who had finally run out of ways to earn love from people who had no intention of giving it. But I heard the word leave my mouth, and I did not take it back. My father's voice dropped low. You will regret this. I already regret a lot of things. This is not one of them. Do not forget who lives in that house. The cold returned to my body, but this time it was different. Sharper, cleaner. What is that supposed to mean? It means if you think your name on paper makes you untouchable, you are not as smart as you think. I stood perfectly still. The house. The house I had paid off. The house I allowed them to live in, rent-free because my mother cried about losing her garden, and my father said rent would be humiliating at their age. The house whose taxes, insurance, repairs, and new roof had all somehow become my responsibility. You are threatening me with my own property? I asked. I'm reminding you that family arrangements are complicated. No, I said, they are not. I own the house. You live there because I allowed it. He gave a short, mean laugh. You always did think money made you powerful. No, Dad. I think truth does. That was when Chloe's name flashed across my screen. Not a call, a notification. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear and opened Instagram with shaking fingers. Chloe had posted a story. She was standing outside the Porsche dealership under glossy lights, lips pursed, hair perfect, one hand on the hood of a dark blue Macan. My mother was visible behind her, holding a paper cup of coffee. My father's shoulder was in the frame. The caption read, "Some people hate seeing me finally win." My wedding guests had probably already seen it. Cousins, old classmates, maybe even business contacts. Chloe had not just stolen my parents from my wedding, she had turned my boundary into content. Something in me went quiet. Not numb, not broken, quiet. "Tell Chloe congratulations on almost getting her car," I said. My father's voice sharpened. "Do not be sarcastic with me." "I just got married without you," I said. "I can live without paying you." Then I hung up. For a few seconds, I stood outside under the garden lights, listening to the muffled music from my own reception. My whole body was trembling now. I did not feel strong. I felt sick. I felt like a child who had slammed a door and expected punishment to come flying through it. Nathan stepped outside. He did not ask what happened first. He simply held out his hand. I took it. "Do you want me to step in?" he asked. I looked down at our wedding rings. "No." His eyes searched mine. "I need to be the one to say it," I said. "I need to hear myself say it." "You did?" I did. For the first time all day, I cried. Not loud, not dramatically, just one hot tear sliding down my face before I could stop it. Nathan wiped it away with his thumb. "I am proud of you," he said. That almost hurt worse than my father's anger, because I believed him. We went back inside. We cut the cake. We danced our first dance. When Nathan spun me under the lights, people cheered, and I let myself smile for real. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because I had survived saying no. Later that night, after the last guest left, and my dress lay across a chair like shed skin, I read my father's final text. "Do not test me over the house." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. I thought my father was threatening me out of anger. 2 days later, I found out he had already started acting on that threat. For the first 2 days of our honeymoon, I tried very hard to be a woman who had just gotten married, not a daughter who had finally been punished for saying no. Nathan and I flew to Maui the morning after the wedding. I remember sitting by the airplane window, watching Chicago shrink beneath the clouds, telling myself that distance would make everything quieter. I told myself my father's threat was just anger. I told myself my mother would calm him down. I told myself Chloe would get bored once the Porsche story stopped giving her attention. That was another talent I had learned young, turning obvious danger into something I could survive by minimizing it. The resort was beautiful in a way that almost felt offensive. Our balcony faced the ocean. At sunrise, the water looked silver and blue, and warm air moved through the curtains before we were fully awake. Nathan ordered coffee and fresh fruit to the room. We sat outside in robes, barefoot, married, watching waves fold into themselves again and again. For 48 hours, we did not talk about my parents, not directly. Sometimes Nathan would touch my hand if my eyes went too far away. Sometimes I would catch myself checking my phone even though it was on airplane mode. Sometimes I would imagine my mother calling, her voice finally soft, saying, "Ava, I am sorry. I should have been there. I do not know what came over me." Then I would hate myself for wanting it, because I was 33 years old. I had a company, a husband, employees, contracts, a life I had built with my own hands, and still, some child-sized part of me wanted my mother to choose me after everything she had already chosen instead. On the third morning, Nathan went downstairs to take a call from one of his partners. I stayed on the balcony with my coffee cooling beside me and turned off airplane mode. My phone exploded. At first, it was just vibration after vibration, so many alerts that the screen froze. Then the notifications began stacking. 57 unread text messages, 23 missed calls, dozens of social media tags, emails from people who should never have known anything about my family. My stomach dropped before I read a single word. The first text was from Aunt Lorraine. "I hope you are proud of yourself. Your mother is devastated." The next was from Uncle Keith. "Cutting off elderly parents during your honeymoon? You always were unstable when things didn't go your way." Then a cousin I had not seen in 6 years. "Chloe told us everything. You stole from her and then made her look crazy. Disgusting." Another cousin, "You used family money for that tacky wedding and now you want to play victim?" I sat there in the soft Hawaiian morning, feeling the sun on my knees, reading messages that made no sense until they made perfect sense. Denise. My mother had done what she always did. She had found a room before I could enter it and filled it with her version of me. Nathan came back just as I opened Facebook. "Ava," he said. I could not answer. My mother had posted a video. It was 10 minutes long. The thumbnail showed her sitting in the living room of the house I had paid off, wearing a pale blue cardigan and holding a tissue against her cheek. Behind her, the room looked perfect. Fresh flowers on the coffee table, soft lighting, family photos arranged like evidence of love. My wedding photo was not there. I pressed play. My mother looked into the camera with red-rimmed eyes and the gentle, trembling expression she used whenever an audience was available. "I never thought I would have to do this," she began. "But there comes a time when a mother has to tell the truth, even when it breaks her heart." Nathan sat beside me without speaking. Denise took a shaky breath. For years, Victor and I protected Ava. We protected her reputation. We protected her from consequences. We hoped love would heal whatever bitterness she carried toward her sister. But after what she did to Chloe, we cannot stay silent anymore. My fingers tightened around the phone. She told people I had stolen Chloe's life savings. She told people Chloe had been saving for years to launch her business properly, and I had manipulated access to family accounts, taken the money, and used it to help pay for my extravagant wedding. She said when they confronted me, I cut off my elderly parents financially in retaliation. She said I had always been brilliant but troubled. She said success had made me arrogant. She said Nathan was controlling me. That was the part that made him laugh once, quietly, without humor. Then Denise lowered her voice. "We are worried about Ava's mental state. We have been worried for a long time." I stopped breathing. There it was again. Stable, unstable, mental state. Words placed like little charges under a bridge. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, but no tears actually fell. That was something I noticed only because I had spent a lifetime studying her face, trying to predict when love would turn into punishment. "She is still our daughter," Denise continued. "We love her. But love does not mean allowing abuse. Love does not mean allowing one child to destroy an entire family because she cannot stand that her sister deserves happiness too." The video ended with her asking people to pray for us. Not for me, for us. I clicked the comments, and that was when the humiliation became something bigger. Neighbors had commented, church friends, my father's golf buddies, my mother's book club, relatives I barely knew, people who had eaten food I paid for at family parties were calling me greedy, cruel, narcissistic, dangerous. One woman wrote, "No wonder Denise always looks so stressed. Imagine raising a daughter who turns on you like that." Another wrote, "I always sensed something cold about Ava. Poor Chloe." Then I saw a comment that made the blood leave my face. "Someone should look into her company. People like this don't just steal from family." Below it, another person had tagged North Star Data Systems. then another, then another. My private family disaster had been dragged to the doorstep of my company. Within an hour, my operations manager texted me. Ava, sorry to bother you on honeymoon. Are you aware of posts tagging North Star? We're monitoring but need guidance. 2 minutes later, an investor messaged. Is there any truth to allegations involving family funds? Need to know whether this creates exposure. Then a government contract liaison. Polite but terrifying. Please advise whether recent public accusations may affect executive certification disclosures. That was when I understood this was not just my mother punishing me for freezing a credit card. This was not only about embarrassment or family gossip. This was a coordinated attack on my credibility, my business, and the life I had built outside their control. My mother knew exactly where to aim. For years, she had smiled at my success in public and resented it in private. She loved telling people her daughter was a CEO when it made her look good. But the second I stopped funding her life, she tried to make that same success look suspicious. I stood up too fast, and the balcony tilted. I need to respond, I said. Nathan rose with me. No. I turned on him. No? Not in the comments. She is lying. I know. She is tagging my company through other people. I know. She is making me sound unstable. I know. His calm almost made me angrier because my body wanted action. I wanted to post bank statements, receipts, mortgage records, every transfer I had ever made to my parents. I wanted to write. I paid for that house. I paid for their groceries. I paid for Chloe's fake life. I wanted to tear my mother's performance open in front of everyone. Nathan took the phone gently from my hand and placed it face down on the table. They want a spectacle, he said. Do not give them one until we control the room. I look guilty if I stay silent. No, he said. You look disciplined. I hated that he was right. That was one of the hardest lessons I learned during all of this. Silence can feel like weakness when you are used to begging people to believe you. But silence can also be strategy. My mother had emotion, performance, and an audience. If I rushed in with rage, I would become exactly the version of Ava she had spent years describing. Brilliant but troubled, successful but unstable, cold until challenged, then hysterical. I sat back down and covered my face with both hands. The worst part, I whispered, is that I still want her to call and say she is sorry. Nathan did not answer immediately. That was why I trusted him. He did not rush to make pain sound simple. Finally, he said, Of course you do. She is your mother. She is trying to ruin me. Yes, he said, and you can know that while still grieving what she should have been. That broke me in a way the video had not. I cried then. Quietly at first, then with my whole body, bent over on a balcony in paradise while strangers online decided whether I was a thief, a liar, or a mentally unstable daughter abusing her poor elderly parents. Nathan sat beside me, one hand on my back, not telling me to calm down, not telling me to be strong. I was so tired of being strong. By noon, the video had been shared more than 100 times. By evening, someone had posted side-by-side pictures of my wedding venue and Chloe's tearful selfie with a caption about what happens when one sister steals the spotlight and the savings. Chloe shared it with a broken heart emoji. My mother commented, Please be kind. We are all in pain. That was Denise Sinclair's gift. She could stab you and then ask the crowd to admire how gracefully she held the knife. I spent that night in bed beside my new husband, staring at the ceiling while the ocean moved in the dark outside. I thought about all the years people had believed my mother because she was softer than me, because she cried easier, because I had been trained to clean up the mess privately while she performed the injury publicly. The worst part was not that strangers believed her. The worst part was realizing she had been preparing them to believe her for years. The next morning, I woke up to one notification that did not fit with the others. No profile picture, no normal text thread, just an encrypted message request from an app I barely used anymore. The sender name made me sit up. Marcus Bell, Chloe's husband. The message contained only one line: do not reply. Check the county property records for your parents' address. Now. For a few seconds, I just stared at Marcus's message like it was written in another language. Do not reply. Check the county property records for your parents' address. Now. Marcus Bell was not the kind of person who inserted himself into family drama. In 5 years of knowing him, I had heard him speak maybe 20 complete sentences at Sinclair gatherings, and half of those were answers to my father's technology complaints. My family treated him like furniture that could fix Wi-Fi. Chloe treated him like an accessory she forgot to polish unless there was a camera around. So if Marcus was reaching out through an encrypted app, telling me not to reply, something was very wrong. Nathan read the message over my shoulder. His face changed in a way I had only seen once before, when a former client of his ignored legal advice and walked straight into criminal exposure. It was not panic. Nathan did not panic. It was focus. Give me your laptop, he said. I handed it to him without arguing. We were still in Maui. Still in a room with white sheets and an ocean view. Still technically on our honeymoon. Outside, the morning was bright enough to make the world look innocent. Inside, Nathan sat at the small desk by the window and pulled up the county property records database for my parents' address. My parents' address. That phrase had always bothered me a little. Everyone called it their house. Even me sometimes, because they lived there, hosted there, decorated there, and used the front porch for my mother's Christmas card photos. But the house was mine. I had paid off the mortgage. I paid the taxes. I paid the insurance. I paid for the roof, the furnace, the stone patio. My mother insisted was necessary for resale value, even though she had no intention of selling anything she could make me maintain. Nathan typed in the parcel number from an old tax document saved in my files. The results loaded. At first, I saw familiar things. The deed from when I took ownership, tax assessments, a lien release from the mortgage company after I paid the balance in full. Then Nathan scrolled lower and stopped. His shoulders went still. What? I asked. He did not answer immediately. Nathan. He leaned closer to the screen. There's a new filing. My heartbeat began to pound in my ears. What kind of filing? It was recorded on your wedding day. For a moment, the room disappeared. Not faded, disappeared. All I could see was that empty front row, my mother's irritated voice, my father screaming about a declined card, Chloe standing beside a Porsche with her hand on the hood like she had won something. Recorded on my wedding day. Nathan opened the document preview. The system was slow, each second stretching until I wanted to grab the screen and shake the truth out of it. When the PDF finally loaded, he exhaled once through his nose. Ava, he said quietly. Someone opened a home equity line against the property. I moved behind him and looked over his shoulder. The amount was $150,000. My mouth went dry. No, I said. Nathan clicked through the pages. The lender is a private firm, not a major bank, high risk, fast funding type. I did not do this. I know. I never signed this. I know. But there was my name, Ava Sinclair, printed neatly, Then a signature that was supposed to be mine, sitting beneath a statement affirming that I had requested the credit line voluntarily. I bent closer. It looked like my signature if someone had practiced from an old birthday card and missed the rhythm. The A was too wide, the S had the wrong angle. Whoever forged it knew what my name looked like, but not how my hand moved. My body went cold from the inside out. Nathan opened another attached document. His jaw tightened. "What is that?" I whispered. "A deed-related filing. It looks like either an attempted transfer or a supporting document to make the lender believe there was authorization tied to the property." "I don't understand." He turned slightly toward me. "It may not be clean enough to hold up if challenged, but it may have been enough to get money released quickly." Money. The word made me think of the Porsche dealership, the down payment, Chloe's rebrand, my father's panic when the card was declined. How could they do this? I asked. But as soon as I asked, I knew. My mother kept everything. When I left for college, she insisted on holding my birth certificate, social security card, old medical records, copies of my driver's license, and tax documents from my first jobs. She said I was too careless, too busy, too young to understand how important papers worked. When I asked for them back years later, she gave me some things and claimed she could not find others. I believed her because believing my mother was careless felt less painful than believing she was strategic. Now, I pictured her standing in the upstairs hallway, opening that old cedar filing cabinet, pulling out pieces of my identity, like ingredients, birth certificate, social security number, driver's license copy, tax records, signature samples, enough to make a version of me that could be used when the real me was busy getting married. I sat down on the edge of the bed before my knees could fail. "They didn't just skip my wedding," I said. Nathan looked at me. "They used my wedding day because they knew I would be too distracted to notice." He did not soften the truth. He loved me enough not to lie. "Yes," he said. The sound that came out of me was not crying exactly. It was smaller, emptier, like my body tried to sob and discovered it had gone numb instead. I wrapped my arms around my stomach and stared at the floor while the ocean kept flashing blue beyond the balcony doors. Nathan started working. That was what saved me in those first minutes, not because he took over my life, but because he gave structure to a disaster that felt too enormous to touch. He downloaded the property documents, he saved timestamps, he pulled my old mortgage records from my cloud storage. He asked me for access to my credit monitoring account, then sat beside me while I logged in with fingers that barely obeyed. There were new alerts, a hard inquiry, a new secured credit line, a lender name I had never heard before. Then Nathan helped me request the preliminary loan information. We had to verify my identity, which felt grotesque, considering my identity had apparently already been borrowed by criminals wearing my family's faces. When the transaction details came through, I felt the floor fall again. A $140,000 wire had been initiated, not the full 150. Fees and reserves had eaten some of it, but $140,000 had moved out. The recipient name was not Chloe, not my parents. It was a shell-looking payment processor connected to an offshore crypto gambling platform. I read it 3 times because my brain refused to accept the words together. Crypto, gambling, offshore. Nathan leaned back slowly. "This is bigger than a car," he said. I looked at him. "Chloe?" He did not answer right away, which was answer enough. Chloe had always gambled emotionally, with lies, attention, image, money that was not hers. But actual gambling? Illegal offshore accounts? Debt large enough to steal against my house? My sister, the lifestyle influencer who posted smoothies, designer bags, and captions about feminine abundance, might have been funneling stolen money into a gambling hole my parents helped her hide. I thought about my mother's video, her trembling voice, her tissue, her claim that I had stolen Chloe's life savings. She had not just been lying, she had been covering a crime. I want to call the police, I said. Nathan folded his hands once, carefully. We can. Good. But Ava, listen to me first. I am listening. If you call right now with half the documents and all the emotion, your parents will say exactly what they are already saying online, that you are unstable, that you took out the loan yourself, that you are trying to punish them after a family argument. They forged my name. I believe you. The documents will help prove it. But we need clean records, a timeline, credit alerts, bank confirmations, lender communications, screenshots of the smear campaign, and anything that shows motive. We need to preserve everything before they delete, edit, or destroy it. I hated every word because every word was reasonable. That was the trap with people like my family. They could act recklessly, cruelly, even criminally. But if I reacted with normal human devastation, they would use my reaction as evidence. Their chaos was always somehow my instability. I stood up and paced the room. I cannot stay here, I said. Nathan watched me. Are you sure? No, I mean, yes. I don't know. I pressed my hands to my face, though. This is our honeymoon. I know. You didn't marry me to spend your first week as my husband building a fraud file against my parents. A small, sad smile touched his mouth. I married you. That includes whatever happens after. I wanted to collapse into that. Instead, I took a breath and forced myself to think like the woman my father always mocked. The CEO, the woman who built a company by learning how to make decisions while afraid. We go home, I said. Nathan nodded once. Then we go home. After that, everything moved quickly. I called the airline while Nathan organized documents into folders, property records, credit alerts, loan documents, social media defamation, family threats. I took screenshots until my camera roll looked like evidence instead of a life. My father's texts, Chloe's Porsche post, my mother's video, comments tagging my company, messages from investors, the county filing recorded on my wedding day. Every screenshot felt like picking up broken glass with bare hands. Before we left the resort, I stood on the balcony one last time. The ocean was violently beautiful. Couples laughed somewhere below us by the pool. A woman in a sun hat took a picture of her drink. The world had the nerve to continue being lovely while mine rearranged itself into a crime scene. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed that if she became useful enough, her family would finally protect her. Instead, they had used every useful thing about me: my money, my name, my documents, my guilt. On the flight back to Chicago, Nathan slept for maybe 20 minutes. I did not sleep at all. I sat with my laptop open, making a timeline from the day my parents missed the wedding to the moment Marcus messaged me. Wedding ceremony, card locked, Porsche attempt failed, father threatened house, mother posted smear video, county filing discovered, HELOC opened, wire initiated. Each line made the pattern clearer. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a family argument that got out of hand. This was a plan, and the part that hurt most was how confident they had been that I would never fight back. Because why would I? I had been trained to feel guilty for wanting my own birthday cake, guilty for winning awards, guilty for earning money, guilty for not giving enough, even after giving more than any daughter should have been asked to give. By the time the plane touched down in Chicago, grief had not left me, but something else had joined it. Preparation. We landed late, under a low gray sky. the kind that made the airport windows look like dark mirrors. I turned my phone back on before we reached baggage claim. Another wave of messages came in. More relatives, more accusations. One voicemail from my mother that began with, "Ava, if you keep acting like this, you are going to leave us no choice. No choice." That phrase would mean something different very soon. Nathan loaded our bags into the car. Neither of us suggested going home first. We drove straight toward the house. My house. The closer we got, the more my body remembered every room. The front steps where Chloe once cried because I got into a better college. The kitchen where my mother told me successful women were lonely. The dining room where my father accepted my money with one hand and criticized my life with the other. I wanted answers. I wanted to look my parents in the face and see whether shame was still possible for them. But when we turned onto the street, I saw cars. Not one or two, dozens. Luxury SUVs lined the curb. Music drifted from the backyard. Laughter carried over the fence. Someone had set up valet cones near the driveway like this was a fundraiser, not the scene of a felony. Nathan slowed the car. "What is this?" I whispered. Then I saw Chloe through the side gate. She was standing in my backyard in a designer dress, holding a champagne flute, smiling at a cluster of neighbors like she was welcoming them to her estate. My sister lifted her glass and said loudly enough for me to hear through the open window, "I just feel so blessed to finally build something of my own." And that was when I realized I had not come home to confront my family. I had come home to watch them celebrate stealing from me. Nathan parked half a block away from the house because there was nowhere closer to stop. That alone told me everything I needed to know. My parents had always loved entertaining, but only when someone else paid for it. They loved the impression of abundance, fresh flowers, imported wine, catered food, polished silver, neighbors walking through the front door and telling Denise she had such wonderful taste. My mother would smile softly and say, "Oh, we just believe a home should feel welcoming," while I stood in the kitchen calculating how many of those welcoming details had gone on my card. But this was different. This was not Sunday dinner or a holiday gathering. This looked like a victory party. Luxury cars lined both sides of the street. A black Range Rover sat in the driveway. Two Mercedes SUVs were parked at angles near the curb. Music floated over the fence, something upbeat and expensive sounding. The side gate was open, and through it I could see rented cocktail tables, white umbrellas, flower arrangements, and a bartender in a black vest shaking drinks beneath the pergola I had paid to repair the previous summer. My chest tightened. "They used it already," I whispered. Nathan looked towards the backyard. "The money? The money, the house, the story, all of it." He reached for my hand before I opened the car door. "Ava, listen to me. You do not have to confront them in front of everyone." "Yes," I said, still watching Chloe laugh near the patio. "I do. That may be exactly what they want." "Maybe," I said, "but I need to see their faces." It was not the smartest answer. I know that now. Legally, emotionally, strategically, walking into that backyard was like stepping onto a stage someone else had built and lit. But I was still new to choosing myself. I had not yet learned that truth does not automatically win just because you bring it into a room. Sometimes people protect the lie because the lie is more comfortable. I stepped out of the car with the folder of printed documents pressed against my ribs. The first person to notice me was Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, president of the Neighborhood Association and unofficial judge of every lawn, wreath, and mailbox on the block. She was standing near the gate in a cream pantsuit, holding a glass of white wine. Her eyebrows lifted when she saw me. "Ava," she said, not warmly. "Mrs. Whitaker." Her eyes flicked to Nathan, then back to me. Your mother said you were still on your honeymoon. I was. Something in her expression cooled further. I hope you are not here to upset her. She has been through quite enough. For a second, I almost explained. I almost told her I had paid off the house where she was drinking wine. I almost told her my mother had lied to her face. But then I heard Chloe's voice from the backyard, bright and practiced. I honestly believe women need to stop apologizing for manifesting success. Nathan's jaw tightened. I walked past Mrs. Whitaker. The backyard looked like a lifestyle magazine spread. Catered appetizers on slate trays, crystal drink dispensers filled with fruit water, white roses everywhere, because apparently even my wedding flowers had been copied and repurposed into Chloe's celebration of herself. A photographer moved through the crowd taking candid shots. Several people held phones up, recording snippets for social media. And in the center of it all stood my sister. Chloe wore a pale pink designer dress, strappy heels, and the kind of soft makeup that made her look innocent from a distance. She had one hand on her chest while she spoke to a cluster of neighbors and two men in linen blazers I did not recognize. I just want every young woman watching my journey to know that discipline matters, she said. People see the outcome, but they do not see the sacrifice. Sacrifice. My fingers tightened around the folder. Denise stood nearby, glowing with maternal pride. Victor was at the outdoor bar, laughing too loudly with a man from his golf club. Neither of them had the face of someone afraid of consequences. They looked relaxed, celebratory, certain. That was what finally snapped the last thread of my hesitation. I walked straight to the buffet table, where Chloe's guests were picking at tiny crab cakes and goat cheese tartlets. I set the folder down hard enough to make a few people turn. Chloe saw me then. Her smile froze for half a second before she widened it. Ava, she called, sweet as poison. Oh my God, I thought you were in Maui. I was, I said. Then someone opened a $150,000 home equity line against my property using my forged signature. The backyard went quiet in waves. First, the people nearest me stopped talking. Then the silence spread toward the bar, the patio, the cluster around Chloe. Music still played from hidden speakers, cheerful and absurd. Chloe laughed lightly. What are you talking about? I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. County filing, loan record, signature page, wire transfer confirmation. I laid each page on the buffet table like cards. $140,000 moved through a payment processor connected to offshore gambling activity. Someone gasped. Victor turned slowly from the bar. Denise did not panic. That was the detail I remember most. My mother did not look shocked. She did not rush over asking what I meant. She simply transformed. Her shoulders curved inward. Her mouth trembled. Her eyes became wet on command. Ava, she said softly, please do not do this here. The crowd shifted toward her voice. Of course they did. Denise knew how to make herself the wounded center of any room. Do what? I asked. Tell the truth? This is exactly what we were afraid of, she said, looking not at me, but at everyone else. She gets overwhelmed, and then she creates these stories. Nathan stepped beside me. Mrs. Sinclair, I would be very careful with that statement. Denise ignored him. She has always been jealous of Chloe, my mother continued, her voice breaking beautifully. We tried to handle this privately. We tried to protect Ava's dignity. My dignity? I repeated. Mrs. Whitaker moved closer, looking between us with visible discomfort. Denise pressed the tissue she somehow already had to her mouth. Honey, you are having another episode. There it was. Another episode. The phrase struck the crowd exactly the way she intended. People who had been curious now looked cautious. A neighbor stepped back slightly. One of the men in linen lowered his glass. I felt Nathan's hand brush my elbow, warning me without words. Stay steady. So I did. I am not having an episode, I said. I am standing in a house I own, asking why my name was forged on loan documents. Victor finally walked over. His face was red, but his voice was controlled in that dangerous way I knew too well. You need to leave, he said. No. His eyes flashed. This is not your home. It is my property. He smiled then, and something about that smile made my stomach turn. You really should have spoken to an attorney before embarrassing yourself. Nathan's expression sharpened. I am an attorney. Victor looked him up and down. A husband playing lawyer at a family gathering is not the same thing as understanding family law. Nathan's voice stayed calm. Try me. For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then he reached into a leather folder one of his friends handed him and pulled out a stack of papers. He held them toward me. What is this? I asked. Notice of civil action, he said, since you insist on performing for an audience. Nathan took the papers before I could. He scanned the first page. His face did not change, but I saw his eyes harden. Ava, he said quietly, they are accusing you of elder financial abuse. A murmur moved through the guests. I stared at my father. What? Victor lifted his chin. You manipulated your mother and me for years. You inserted yourself into our finances, took control of family assets, then cut us off when we questioned you about Chloe's missing money. That is insane. Denise gave a tiny sob. Please do not use that word. I almost laughed. Even then, she was policing vocabulary while framing me as mentally unstable in front of the entire neighborhood. Victor pointed toward the documents on the buffet table. Our attorney's already preparing additional filings. We believe you took out that loan yourself, then created this ridiculous forgery story when your spending caught up with you. My spending? I said. I paid for your lives. You controlled us, he snapped. That is what abusers do. The word abuser hit the air and stayed there. People stared at me differently after that. That was the moment I realized how thoroughly my parents had prepared the ground. This was not improvisation. My mother's video, the comments about my mental state, the relatives calling me unstable, the story about Chloe's stolen savings, the elder abuse lawsuit, it all fit together too neatly. They were not defending themselves. They were building a cage. Mrs. Whitaker looked at me with something almost like pity. Ava, your mother did mention you might come here and make accusations. I turned to her. She warned you? She said you were under stress, that you had always struggled when Chloe received attention. The humiliation burned hotter than anger. I looked around and saw people I had known for years avoiding my eyes. People who had eaten Thanksgiving pies I bought, attended parties funded by my work, praised my mother's taste in rooms decorated with my money. They had heard my mother's version first, and now every document in my hands looked to them like part of my breakdown. Chloe drifted close while the adults murmured around us. She leaned in, still smiling for anyone watching from a distance. Turn the card back on, she whispered. I looked at her. Excuse me? Start the payments again. Unlock Dad's card. Stop making this ugly. You forged my signature. Her eyes hardened, but her mouth stayed sweet. You have no idea what you are talking about. I know about the loan. You know what Marcus wants you to know. That name hit me strangely. Marcus? Chloe's nostrils flared. My husband is confused. He has been under pressure. Do not drag him into your little revenge fantasy. So he told you he contacted me. For the first time, real fear moved across her face. Quick, gone almost immediately. Then she stepped closer, close enough that only I could hear her. Listen to me carefully, she said. Mom and Dad are done playing nice. You either get back in line, or they will make sure everyone thinks you are insane. Not dramatic, not difficult, insane. Do you understand what that does to a CEO? To a woman with government contracts? My skin prickled. There it was, the real threat, stripped of tears and family language. I looked past her at my mother, who was still accepting comfort from Mrs. Whitaker, at my father, who was speaking gravely to two men as if he were the victim of a dangerous daughter, at the guests watching me like I might shatter a glass and prove them right. I had lost this room before I entered it, but I had not lost the truth. I am selling the house, I said. Chloe blinked, then she laughed. Not her pretty laugh, not her influencer laugh, her real one, small and mean. Oh, Ava. What? She tilted her head. You really do think being the smart one means you know everything. Nathan stepped closer. Chloe, I would stop talking. She ignored him. You cannot sell what you do not own, she said. The backyard noise seemed to recede. I stared at her. What did you say? Her smile widened. Mom and Dad transferred the deed to me last month. My hand went numb around the folder. No, I said. Yes. She looked around like she could already see the future she had stolen. This house is mine now. Nathan took my wrist gently but firmly. Ava, he said, we are leaving. I need to. No, his voice dropped. Not here, not like this. Chloe's eyes glittered. That's right. Let your husband drag you away before you embarrass yourself more. I wanted to slap her. I wanted to scream until every neighbor understood. I wanted to grab the documents from the table and force each person to read them line by line. But Nathan was right. My family had built this scene for my reaction. If I gave them rage, they would use it. If I cried, they would use it. If I stayed, they would keep tightening the circle until I looked exactly like the unstable woman my mother had promised them. So, I let my husband lead me through the gate. Behind us, Denise cried louder. Victor told someone to collect the documents. Chloe said something about privacy and trauma, already turning the moment into content. We reached the driveway, and I finally pulled my hand free. They stole my house, I said. Nathan's face was pale with anger. They may have tried. She said the deed was transferred. Attempted transfer does not mean valid transfer. But everyone believed them. For now. I looked back at the glowing backyard, the rented lights, the flowers, the people eating stolen luxury with clean consciences. My whole body shook with the effort of not collapsing. Then a voice came from the shadows near the side of the garage. She is lying about one thing. Nathan turned first, putting himself half in front of me. Marcus Bell stepped into the driveway. He looked tired. His tie was loosened. His face was drawn in a way that made him seem older than he had at the wedding. In one hand, he held a black USB drive. Chloe's quiet, underestimated husband looked directly at me. The deed is dirty, Beth, he said, but it is not the worst thing they did. He held the drive out to Nathan. Everything you need is on this. For a moment, nobody moved. Marcus stood in the shadow of the garage with that black USB drive in his hand, looking less like the quiet husband everyone ignored and more like a man who had been waiting years to finally exhale. The music from the backyard still drifted over the fence. People were laughing again. My mother had already started repairing the scene. Chloe was probably telling everyone Marcus had been confused, stressed, unstable by association because that was how my family worked. Any person who threatened the lie became sick in their version of the story. Nathan looked at the USB drive, then at Marcus. "How do I know what is on this?" he asked. Marcus did not seem offended. If anything, he looked relieved to be questioned by someone serious. "You do not," he said. "Not until you inspect it on an isolated machine. But I included hashes, timestamps, original headers, cloud sync logs, and a written index. I made duplicate copies. One is with my attorney, one is somewhere Chloe cannot access." That was the first time I realized Marcus was not just scared, he was prepared. I stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" His eyes shifted toward the backyard. Through the gate, Chloe's laugh rose above the music, bright and fake and careless. "Because you and I were both useful to them," Marcus said, "until we stopped obeying." I did not know what to say to that. Nathan accepted the drive, careful not to touch the metal connector directly. "We need to leave." Marcus nodded. "Yes, now." That made my stomach tighten. "Why?" "Because Chloe's going to notice I am gone, and Victor is going to realize I talked to you. He has been drinking. He is not rational when he feels cornered." "My father is never rational when he feels cornered," I said. Marcus gave me a tired look. "This is different." Nathan opened the passenger door for me, but I stayed where I was. "No," I said. "I need to know what is happening." "Ava," Nathan warned. "I am done being moved from room to room while everyone else knows more about my life than I do." Marcus looked at Nathan, silently asking permission, or maybe measuring risk. Nathan gave the smallest nod. Marcus stepped closer to the car, keeping his voice low. "I have been documenting them for 5 years," he said. 5 years. The number hit me strangely, not because it was impossible, but because it meant someone else had been watching. Someone else had seen what I had spent a lifetime being told I imagined. "At first, I was documenting Chloe," Marcus continued. "Not for court, for myself. She would tell me I misunderstood things, that conversations never happened, that I was too sensitive when she humiliated me in front of your parents. So I started keeping records, texts, emails, calendar changes, bank alerts, anything that proved I was not crazy." That word again. Crazy. It circled all of us like a family curse. "My parents knew?" I asked. "Your parents encouraged it," he said. "Victor called me the help. Denise called me quiet in the same tone people use for stupid. Chloe said I should be grateful she made me look less boring online." His face did not change much, but something in his voice cracked. I stayed longer than I should have because I thought if I could understand the pattern, I could protect myself from it. Then your father asked me to secure the home network 2 years ago, after he clicked on a fake investment email. Despite everything, Nathan almost smiled. "Of course he did." Marcus nodded. "He gave me admin access to the router, the security cameras, the shared family cloud, the office desktop, the smart TV system, and 2 old laptops he said were too slow. He wanted everything convenient. No passwords he had to remember, no two-factor authentication unless I handled it. He thought technology was beneath him, so he handed the keys to the person he ignored." For the first time that day, I felt something close to grim satisfaction. "What did you find?" I asked. Marcus's mouth tightened. "Enough!" Behind us, a burst of applause came from the backyard. Chloe was probably making another speech about building something of her own. I wanted to walk back in and drag the truth behind me like a storm, but Nathan's hand at my back kept me grounded. Marcus kept talking. I did not hack random accounts. I did not break into bank systems. I preserved what they gave me access to, shared cloud backups, draft emails, scanned documents, camera footage from common areas, spreadsheet versions saved automatically, metadata from files they edited, email headers from messages forwarded through the family account. Your father thought deleting something meant it disappeared. Nathan looked at the USB in his hand. Chain of custody? I documented export times, device sources, file paths, original creation dates, modification dates, and backup logs. I also made screen recordings while retrieving the most important folders. Nathan's expression changed. Not surprise exactly. Respect. You knew what you were doing. Marcus looked down. I am a cybersecurity consultant. They treated me like the Wi-Fi guy because that made them feel bigger. A silence settled between us. I thought of all the dinners where Marcus sat quietly while Victor interrupted him, all the holidays where Chloe posed beside him like he was part of her outfit, all the times Denise praised him for being so low maintenance. I had mistaken his silence for passivity because I was too busy surviving my own role in the family to fully see his. I am sorry, I said. Marcus looked at me quickly, almost startled. For what? For not noticing more. He glanced toward the house. You were trying not to drown. That simple sentence almost undid me, because that was what no one in my family had ever admitted. That surviving them took effort. That silence was not consent. That exhaustion was not weakness. That sometimes a person looked functional only because collapse was not an option. Nathan closed the car door gently but did not rush us. What is Chloe involved in? He asked. Marcus's face hardened. Illegal gambling debt. More than $100,000. Maybe closer to $200,000 if you count interest and threats. She started with offshore betting apps, then private tables, then crypto transfers. She lost money she did not have and lied to investors to cover it. Investors? I asked. Her lifestyle brand is not a real business the way she presents it. There are shell invoices, fake consulting expenses, inflated campaign projections, and investor funds routed through accounts she controls. Some of the money went to gambling, some went to appearances, clothes, events, car deposits, paid followers, rented luxury spaces. My brain snagged on one detail. The Porsche. Marcus nodded. It was not just vanity. She needed the car for a rebrand campaign because she was trying to attract new money. She thought if she looked wealthier, she could buy time. And my parents knew? His silence answered before he did. Victor knew enough, Marcus said. Denise knew Chloe was in trouble and helped make it your fault emotionally before they made it your fault legally. They decided your name was the cleanest source of money. I wrapped my arms around myself. My name, my money, my house, my life. To them, those were not mine. They were family resources waiting to be reassigned to the daughter they loved more. Marcus glanced down the street, then back at us. There is another problem, he said. The people Chloe owes money to are not just online ghosts. They have sent messages, threats, pictures of the house, pictures of Denise outside the grocery store, pictures of Victor at the club. My mouth went dry. They know where my parents live. They know where the money trail leads. If the loan collapses, if Chloe cannot pay, if the investors start asking questions, they may come here. I looked at the house again. The beautiful lawn, the glowing windows, the rented tables, the backyard full of neighbors drinking wine beneath string lights while an offshore gambling debt sat under all of it like gasoline. My parents had brought criminal danger into the house I owned, not because they were desperate in some tragic, unavoidable way, Because Chloe wanted to look successful. Because Denise wanted to protect her golden child. Because Victor believed anything attached to me could be used without consequence. I felt anger then, clean and deep. Not the frantic anger from the backyard, not humiliation, something steadier. "What else is on the drive?" Nathan asked. Marcus swallowed. "Property documents, drafts of the deed transfer, versions with different dates, signature samples, messages about the Hellock, Chloe's business records, investor communications, screenshots from Denise's planned posts about Ava, notes from Victor's attorney." Nathan's eyes sharpened. "What notes?" Marcus looked at me. "The worst folder is not about the house." Something in his tone made the hair rise on my arms. "What is it about?" I asked. He hesitated. "You," he said. I felt Nathan shift closer. Marcus continued, carefully now, like he was choosing each word to cause the least damage while still telling the truth. "They have a folder labeled Ava Mental Health. It includes old family emails, edited timelines, scanned journal pages, medical-looking documents I do not think are real, and draft affidavits. Denise has been collecting stories about you for years. Not accurate stories, useful ones." The world narrowed again. Useful stories. That was exactly what my mother made of pain. She did not remember what happened. She remembered what could be used. "What were they going to do with it?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Marcus looked at Nathan, then back at me. "You need to read it somewhere safe." A shout came from the backyard. "Marcus!" Chloe's voice. All three of us froze. "Marcus!" she called again, sharper this time. "Where are you?" Marcus stepped back from the car. "Go," he said. "What about you?" I asked. "I have to walk back in." "No. If I leave with you, they will know everything immediately. I need time to get my own documents and make sure Chloe cannot wipe the shared devices." Nathan studied him. "That is dangerous." Marcus gave a small, humorless smile. "I have been living with danger. At least now I know its name." Chloe's heels clicked somewhere near the side gate. Nathan opened my door. "Ava, in the car." This time I got in. Marcus looked at me through the open window. "I am sorry about your wedding," he said. The kindness of that almost broke me more than the betrayal. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once and stepped back into the shadow, becoming invisible again exactly the way my family had trained themselves to see him. Nathan drove away without turning on the headlights until we reached the end of the block. In the rearview mirror, the house glowed like nothing ugly had ever happened inside it. I held my hands together in my lap to stop them from shaking. For the first time since Marcus's message arrived, I was not just thinking about forged signatures or stolen equity or Chloe's gambling debt. I was thinking about a folder with my name on it, a folder my mother had built from every vulnerable moment of my life. By the time we reached our apartment, I already knew sleep was impossible. Nathan set up an old laptop that had never touched our home network. He disabled the Wi-Fi, connected nothing, and opened the USB in isolation. Marcus had organized everything exactly as promised. Folders appeared on the screen. Property, loan, Chloe business, legal strategy, Ava mental health. The cursor hovered over the last one. I thought I had already seen the worst of my family. Then Nathan opened the folder with my name on it. Nathan opened the folder labeled with my name, and for one stupid second, I expected it to contain obvious lies. I expected sloppy exaggerations, maybe old text messages taken out of context, maybe screenshots of me arguing with my mother, maybe some dramatic notes Denise had written after the wedding, trying to make me sound cruel enough to justify what they had done. That would have hurt. but it would not have terrified me. What terrified me was how organized it was. Inside the folder were subfolders arranged by year: college, age 19, business launch, stress incidents, family concerns, medical, legal drafts. There was even a folder called public narrative, like my life was not a life at all, but a campaign they were preparing to sell. Nathan did not touch the keyboard for a moment. He looked at me. "We do not have to read all of this tonight." "Yes," I said. "We do." My voice sounded flat, not brave, not strong, just empty, in the way a person becomes empty when the thing in front of her is so awful that emotion would get in the way of survival. He clicked legal drafts first. That was where we found the petition: emergency conservatorship. The words sat at the top of the document in clean legal formatting, neat and bloodless. I read them 3 times before my brain accepted what they meant. My parents were not just trying to take my house. They were preparing to argue in court that I could not manage my own affairs. Nathan leaned closer, reading fast. "They have not filed it yet," he said. "Yet." "No, but this is advanced." The draft named Victor and Denise Sinclair as proposed financial guardians. It alleged that I was suffering from severe emotional instability, paranoia, delusions involving family members, reckless financial decision-making, and an inability to distinguish reality from perceived betrayal. Perceived betrayal. I almost laughed. My forged signature was sitting in another folder. A fraudulent loan had been opened against my property. My mother had accused me publicly of theft. My sister was drowning in gambling debt, and they were going to tell a court that I was paranoid for noticing. Nathan scrolled lower. Then his face changed. "What?" I asked. He did not answer quickly enough. "Nathan." He turned the laptop slightly toward me. "They listed Northstar." I stared at the screen. Northstar Data Systems appeared under a section titled Assets Requiring Immediate Protective Oversight. My company, my life's work. The thing I had built from nothing but debt, caffeine, humiliation, stubbornness, and a refusal to become what my parents said I was. They had listed my company shares, executive control, voting rights, compensation accounts, and corporate distributions as assets that needed to be managed for Ava's protection. For my protection. I felt the room tilt. "They want Northstar," I whispered. Nathan's jaw tightened. "They want control of your shares, maybe your voting power. Depending on how they tried to structure it, they could pressure the board, interfere with investor confidence, and present themselves as acting in your best interest." My best interest? I stood so quickly the chair scraped backward. My apartment suddenly felt too small. The walls pressed in. The city lights beyond the windows looked distant and unreal. I paced from the kitchen island to the sofa and back again, trying to breathe through the pressure building behind my eyes. The house had been one thing. A devastating thing, yes, but still property. This was different. This was my freedom. My parents were not satisfied with draining my bank account. They were not satisfied with stealing against my home. They were not satisfied with ruining my wedding, lying to relatives, humiliating me online, and using my name as a financial tool. They wanted to legally erase me. They wanted to stand in front of a judge and say, "Give us the keys to Ava's life. She cannot be trusted with herself." Nathan kept reading. "There are emails," he said quietly. I returned to the table. The emails were between my father and an estate attorney I had never heard of, a man whose tone was aggressive enough to make my skin crawl. He asked for a clean timeline of deterioration. My father replied that I had become increasingly hostile since gaining financial success. My mother sent long paragraphs about my history of emotional volatility. Chloe added comments about how my wedding had triggered an identity spiral. Identity spiral. That was Chloe's language. She loved phrases that sounded therapeutic enough to hide cruelty. Then Nathan opened Denise's affidavit draft. I wish I could say I read it like a CEO reviewing hostile documents. I wish I could say I stayed detached. But the first line dragged me backward 20 years. My daughter Ava has struggled with severe emotional instability since late adolescence. I saw myself at 19, not unstable, not dangerous, not delusional, cold. I was 19 years old, standing on the front porch of that same house in February, wearing a sweatshirt under a thin coat because I had packed in a panic. My mother had thrown my duffel bag onto the steps after I refused to hand over part of my scholarship refund for Chloe's educational trip to Europe. Chloe was not studying abroad. She wanted to follow a boy to Paris for 2 weeks and take pictures in front of cafes. I said no. That was all. I said I needed that money for books, housing, and food. My father called me selfish. My mother said I had always resented Chloe's happiness. Chloe cried in the kitchen loud enough for the neighbors to hear if the windows had been open. Then my mother told me if I wanted to act grown, I could survive like a grown woman. She locked the door behind me. I slept on my friend Rachel's couch for 3 weeks. I skipped meals. I went to class with wet hair because I was showering at the campus gym. I cried in library bathrooms not because I was unstable, but because I was 19 and suddenly understood that love in my family had conditions printed in invisible ink. Years later, Denise had turned that winter into evidence. In her affidavit, she claimed, I ran away during a mental episode. She claimed my parents spent weeks trying to locate me. She claimed I refused treatment, rejected family support, and displayed paranoid beliefs that they were using me for money. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Nathan reached for me, but I shook my head. If he touched me, I would break. The folder had more. Screenshots of old posts where I talked about burnout during North Star's first year. A private journal page I had written after my first investor rejection, scanned from a notebook I thought I lost when I moved apartments. Emails where I told my mother I felt exhausted. Text messages where I said I could not handle another family fight. All of it rearranged, all of it stripped of context. Every normal moment of pain had been collected, preserved, and sharpened into a weapon. This is what she does, I said. Nathan looked up. My mother does not remember your hurt. She archives it. He said nothing because there was nothing soft enough to say. Then we opened the public narrative folder. That was where Chloe's drafts were. Social media captions. Announcement templates. A video script titled Family Leadership Transition. A list of talking points for concerned followers. Chloe had written phrases like stepping up during Ava's healing journey and preserving the legacy of a brilliant but overwhelmed founder. Founder, not CEO, not owner. Founder, like I was already a past tense inspirational story. There was a mock press statement suggesting that Chloe Sinclair would become the public-facing executive voice of North Star while I took a private wellness leave. She had even drafted a post of herself standing in my office lobby, thanking people for trusting her to protect what her sister built until Ava was ready to return. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She was going to announce herself into my company, I said. Nathan's voice was low. She was going to try. Would it have worked? He paused. That pause was honest, and it frightened me more than false comfort would have. Not easily, he said. North Star has governance documents, investors, officers, legal protections. They could not simply walk in and take over because they wrote a petition, but if they filed this publicly, while the smear campaign was active, if they got emergency temporary authority, if investors panicked, if government clients paused contracts, if the board felt pressure to stabilize leadership, he stopped. They could damage me badly, I finished. Yes, I sat down, not because I wanted to, because my legs could not hold me. For years, I had carried guilt like an inheritance. Guilt that I succeeded when Chloe did not. Guilt that I could pay bills my parents could not. Guilt that I did not visit enough, give enough, forgive fast enough. Even after the wedding, even after the Porsche, even after the loan, some sick part of me had still whispered, but they are your parents. Now, I looked at a legal plan to remove me from my own life, and that whisper finally died. The house was not enough. The money was not enough. My obedience was not enough. They wanted my name, my company, my credibility, my freedom, and then they wanted applause for saving me from myself. Nathan closed the laptop halfway, not shutting it, just blocking the screen from my eyes. Ava, he said carefully, I need to ask you something. I looked at him. Do you want justice or do you want distance? The question was so clean it hurt, because distance would have meant changing logs, filing reports, cutting contact, letting lawyers quietly untangle the mess while I disappeared from the family narrative. Distance would protect me. Maybe. Eventually. Justice meant something else. Justice meant police reports, civil claims, financial investigations, public evidence. It meant my father might go to prison. My mother might lose everything she had spent her life pretending she earned. Chloe might face charges that could not be smoothed over with tears, captions, or a new dress. Justice meant my biological family would not just be cut off, they would be exposed. And the old training rose up one last time. What kind of daughter does that? For one stupid second, I wondered if I was being cruel. Then I remembered they were trying to legally erase me. I looked at Nathan and said, I want both. He nodded once, not pleased, not excited, just ready. Then we billed it properly. I reached for the laptop and opened it again. There were still folders we had not reviewed. Property, loan, Chloe business, legal strategy. Each one was part of the same machine. A machine my family had built while I was buying them groceries, paying their taxes, answering my mother's calls, and hoping that one day they would love me without needing a receipt. But as I sat there in the blue light of the screen, something in me shifted. I stopped imagining them as parents who had failed me. I started seeing them as opponents who had underestimated me. That may sound cold. Maybe it was. But cold is not always cruel. Sometimes cold is what happens when the fever finally breaks. Nathan pulled out a legal pad and began making categories: fraud, identity theft, defamation, property action, corporate protection, credit freeze, potential federal exposure. I watched his pen move, and for the first time since my wedding, the chaos began forming edges. My parents had spent years relying on my emotional confusion. They depended on shame to keep me quiet. They depended on guilt to keep me paying. They depended on the fact that I would rather absorb pain privately than embarrass them publicly. They had forgotten something. I was not just their daughter. I was the woman who built North Star data systems. I understood patterns. I understood risk. I understood pressure points. I understood how to let arrogant people talk long enough to create their own evidence. That night, sitting beside my husband with my mother's lies glowing on a screen between us, I stopped thinking like their daughter. I started thinking like the CEO they had spent years mocking. By sunrise, our dining table no longer looked like a place where newlyweds might eat breakfast. It looked like a command center. My wedding bouquet sat forgotten on the kitchen counter, browning at the edges. Beside it were folders, printed emails, property records, credit alerts, screenshots, loan documents, and handwritten timelines. Nathan had worked through the night with the kind of controlled focus that made me understand why juries used to trust him. I had worked beside him with coffee I barely tasted and anger I could finally hold without shaking apart. There is a difference between being furious and being ready. That morning, I became ready. Nathan drew a line down the middle of a legal pad. Criminal exposure, he said, writing on one side. Civil remedies on the other. I stared at the words. You make it sound clean. It will not be clean, he said, but it needs to be organized. He began listing our options in plain English because he knew if he buried me in legal language, I would disappear into panic. Police report for identity theft and forgery. Notice to the lender that the loan was fraudulent. Emergency injunction to prevent further transfer or damage to the property. Credit freeze. Corporate governance review to protect North Star. Defamation documentation. Civil fraud claim. Preservation notices so no one could delete records without consequences. The list grew longer and longer. I looked at it and felt the old instinct rise again. Maybe I should just walk away. Not because they deserved mercy, because I was tired. Because part of me wanted to buy peace the way I had always bought it, with silence, with money, with swallowing the truth until it cut me from the inside. Nathan must have seen it on my face. You can choose distance, he said. You do not have to fight every battle. I looked at the laptop, where the Ava mental health folder still sat like a loaded gun. If I disappear, they file the conservatorship, I said. Possibly. If I stay quiet, they keep telling everyone I stole from Chloe. Yes. If I let the house go, they use it to borrow more money or pull investors into Chloe's mess. Likely. Then I do not have a quiet option, I said. Nathan's expression softened. No, but you have a smart one. That was when he brought up Iron Gate Holdings. At first, I hated the idea. It sounded cold, corporate, almost villainous, like something my father would accuse me of doing if he needed a new way to call me heartless. But Nathan explained it carefully, and the more he spoke, the more I understood. The private lender had approved a toxic loan. They had accepted forged identity documents, questionable signatures, and a rushed property filing tied to a borrower who was now ready to dispute everything. They were not innocent victims, but they were vulnerable. If the fraud became public, regulators, insurers, and other borrowers might start asking ugly questions. Ugly questions were expensive. Iron Gate Holdings would be a clean entity, separate from North Star and separate from my personal finances. Its purpose was narrow. Isolate risk, purchase or control the compromised debt if the lender wanted out, and give us legal standing to act quickly against the people abusing the property. Wait, I said, rubbing my temples. You are telling me I can buy the debt someone fraudulently opened against my own house? Potentially, Nathan said. Not because the fraud becomes legitimate, because the lender may prefer assigning its position at a steep discount rather than fighting a borrower with evidence of identity theft, forged signatures, and public exposure. Iron Gate would not validate what your parents did. It would give us leverage. Leverage, I repeated. I use that word in business all the time. I understood it there. Leverage meant pressure without begging. It meant identifying what the other side feared losing and offering a path that cost them less than the alternative. In family, I had never had leverage, only guilt. Nathan prepared the first notice to the lender that morning. It was sharp, factual, and devastating. Attached were copies of my government ID, proof of my location during the wedding events, signature comparisons, the county records, the credit alerts, screenshots of my father's threats, and a draft police report. Nathan included a demand that the lender preserve all application materials, communications, IP logs, identity verification records, underwriting notes, and funding instructions. He also included one sentence that made me sit up straighter. Miss Sinclair is prepared to pursue all available civil, criminal, and regulatory remedies. Not emotional, not dramatic, a warning written in a language institutions understood. By noon, the lender's risk officer called. Nathan put him on speaker with my permission. The man sounded friendly in the desperate way people sound when friendliness is cheaper than liability. "We are, of course, very concerned by what you have sent," he said. "We take allegations of fraud seriously." I looked at Nathan. He muted the call and whispered, "That means he is terrified." For the first time in days, I almost smiled. When Nathan unmuted, I spoke. "This loan was opened using my identity without my consent," I said. "The signature is forged. The funding appears connected to criminal activity. I expect your company to cooperate fully." The risk officer cleared his throat. "We would like to resolve this efficiently." "I'm sure you would." Nathan glanced at me with something like pride, but he did not step in. He let me lead. That mattered. So many people later tried to tell this story like Nathan saved me. He did not. He supported me. He gave me tools. He translated certain systems when I needed help. But I was the one who decided to stop kneeling in front of people who had already stolen the floor beneath me. Over the next 2 days, Iron Gate Holdings came into existence with a name that sounded stronger than I felt. Nathan handled the formation paperwork with another attorney from his firm, so everything stayed clean. I signed where I needed to sign, reviewed what I needed to review, and learned fast. The lender folded faster than I expected. Not completely, not magically. Real life does not work like a courtroom movie where one document makes everyone confess. But they were scared enough to negotiate. The loan file was a disaster. The identity verification was thin. The funding had moved too quickly. Their appetite for a public fight disappeared once they saw the evidence Marcus had preserved and the regulatory exposure Nathan outlined. Iron Gate bought the compromised debt at a steep discount. When Nathan told me the agreement was in place, I did not celebrate. I sat at my desk at North Star after hours, looking through the glass wall at the darkened office where my employees had gone home, and I thought, I just became the creditor on a fraud committed against me. It should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt like turning a weapon around by the handle. At the same time, I froze my credit with all major bureaus, replaced passwords, changed authentication devices, and locked down every personal and corporate account that could be touched by family information. North Star's board chair received a carefully documented briefing. Not gossip, not drama. Facts. Fraudulent property activity. Potential reputational attack. Family members attempting to interfere with executive credibility. I expected disappointment. Instead, she said, "Ava, thank you for telling us before they could." That one sentence steadied me more than she knew. For years, my family had made me believe the truth was dangerous because it would make people leave. But outside that house, with people who respected evidence more than tears, the truth protected me. Nathan also prepared a packet for tax and financial investigators. He did not send wild accusations. He built a clean report from Marcus's evidence. Fake invoices, shell vendors, suspicious transfers, investor funds moving through Chloe-controlled accounts, and offshore gambling connections. Because he had once been a federal prosecutor, he knew the difference between noise and a lead worth following. "Will they arrest her?" I asked. "Not tomorrow," he said. "Maybe not soon. These things take time. But if the records are what Marcus says they are, someone will look. Someone will look." I thought about all the times I had begged my parents to see me. Now all I wanted was for the right strangers to see them clearly. Still, the guilt came. It came at night, usually. During the day, I could be efficient. I could sign documents, answer board questions, review contracts, talk to attorneys, send preservation notices, and become the kind of woman my father hated because he could not intimidate her. But at night, when the apartment was quiet and Nathan slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and imagine Victor in handcuffs, Denise crying in a courtroom, Chloe's face when her followers stopped calling her inspirational. Then the old question would crawl into bed with me. What kind of daughter does this? One night, I whispered it out loud. Nathan turned toward me immediately. I had not realized he was awake. What kind of daughter does this? I asked. His face was shadowed, but his voice was clear. The kind whose parents stopped acting like parents. I closed my eyes. It did not erase the guilt, but it gave me somewhere to put it. A week before Thanksgiving, Marcus contacted us again. He had moved out of the house under the excuse of a consulting trip, taken his essential documents, and placed additional evidence with his attorney. Chloe believed he was being dramatic but harmless, which was exactly what he wanted her to believe. His message was short. They are hosting Thanksgiving. Big announcement. Investors invited, neighbors too. Chloe thinks this is her coronation. I read it twice. Nathan stood behind my chair. What announcement? Marcus answered a minute later. They plan to announce Chloe as official owner of the house. Denise is calling it a healing moment for the family. Victor invited local donors. Chloe invited brand investors. They want Ava publicly humbled if she comes. I leaned back slowly. Of course they did. My parents did not just want the house. They wanted witnesses. They wanted me diminished in front of the same people they had poisoned against me. They wanted Thanksgiving to become proof that Chloe had won and I had been corrected. For a few minutes, I said nothing. Then the shape of it appeared. The guests, the investors, the neighbors, the relatives, the local status crowd, Chloe's cameras, Denise's tears, Victor's speeches, all of them gathered in one room, expecting me to crawl. They were not planning a family dinner. They were building the perfect stage for their own downfall. Nathan saw my face and sighed softly. Ava. I know. No emotional ambush. I know. No walking in without court authority. I know. No public accusations we cannot prove. I turned to him. Then we make sure we can prove them. For the next several days, everything accelerated. Nathan pushed the emergency property petition. Iron Gate's position gave us standing to argue that the occupants were abusing a property tied to fraudulent documents and toxic debt. The evidence showed risk of asset removal, destruction of records, and continued financial harm. Private security was arranged not to threaten anyone, but to keep the peace and document what happened. Marcus confirmed the smart TV system still used credentials Victor had given him, and he documented that access carefully. I knew exactly what my mother expected. She expected rage, tears, a daughter begging to be believed, so I gave her something else. I called her. My hand was steady when I pressed the number. Denise answered on the second ring, voice cautious and sweet. Ava? I looked at Nathan, who sat across from me with a notepad ready. Then I let my voice break. Mom, I whispered, I'm so sorry. Mom, I whispered, I'm so sorry. The words tasted like metal. For a moment, there was only silence on the line. I could picture Denise sitting in the living room of my house, one hand over her chest, eyes narrowing as she tried to decide whether my apology was real or useful. With my mother, those were the only two categories that mattered. If something was real, she could exploit it. If something was useful, she could perform it. "Oh, Ava," she said finally, her voice softening into the tone she used when an audience might be nearby. "I have been praying you would come back to yourself." Come back to myself, as if I had wandered away from sanity instead of away from abuse. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror while Nathan sat on the edge of the bed with a legal pad in his lap. He had already reminded me of the rules. Stay calm. Let her talk. Do not threaten. Do not overpromise. Do not make false statements. The call was being documented in the way Nathan said was lawful and useful, not dramatic, not reckless. We were not relying on it as the centerpiece of anything. We had documents for that. This was only another thread in the rope they had tied for themselves. Still, my hand shook. Not because I was afraid of my mother exactly, because sounding small came too easily. "I was wrong," I said, forcing my voice to crack. "At the barbecue, I embarrassed everyone." Denise released a breath, slow and satisfied. "You did." "I was emotional. Yes. And I should not have cut off the money like that." This time, the silence was different, interested. I looked at Nathan. He wrote one word on the pad. Continue. "I want to fix it," I said. "I can restart the monthly transfers, the 5,000, and I can talk to the card company." Denise did not jump too quickly. She was smarter than that. She let a wounded pause stretch between us, making me wait for forgiveness like a child outside a locked bedroom door. "Ava," she said, "money was never the point." I almost laughed. Nathan looked up sharply, like he felt it coming through the air. I swallowed it. "I know," I said. "The point is respect, family, stability. We have been so worried about you." There it was again. Stability. I leaned closer to the mirror and looked into my own eyes while I answered. "I know I scared everyone." "You did more than scare us, honey. You humiliated your father. You attacked your sister in her own home." Her own home. My fingers tightened around the phone, but my voice stayed weak. "I want to apologize to Chloe, too." Denise's tone warmed by several degrees. "That would mean a lot to her. I heard you're hosting Thanksgiving." Another careful pause. "Yes. I was hoping maybe Nathan and I could come. I could apologize in person. Publicly, if that helps." Nathan stopped writing. Denise inhaled. I knew that sound. I had heard it my whole life right before she accepted victory and dressed it as mercy. "I do not know," she said. "Everyone is still very raw." "I understand. Your sister has been through trauma because of your accusations." "I know. And your father is under enormous stress. You cannot imagine what it feels like for a man his age to be accused by his own daughter after everything he has sacrificed." Sacrificed. The word passed through me like a ghost. My father had sacrificed nothing for me that he had not later invoiced emotionally with interest. "I want to make it right," I said. Denise's voice lowered, intimate now. "Then you need to listen to me very carefully." Nathan's pen moved. "If you come on Thanksgiving, you will not create a scene. You will not bring documents. You will not challenge your father. You will not upset Chloe. You will wear something simple, not one of those severe business outfits. A plain dress would be best." I stared at my reflection. A plain dress. Even now, while planning to parade my humiliation in front of relatives, neighbors, and investors, my mother wanted wardrobe control. "Okay," I whispered. "You will sit at the smaller table with the younger cousins unless I decide otherwise." Nathan's jaw tightened. You will smile when Chloe speaks. I closed my eyes. You will not interrupt when your father makes the announcement. What announcement? I asked, letting just enough confusion into my voice. Denise hesitated, then seemed to decide I had earned the privilege of being wounded in advance. Your father wants to formally recognize Chloe as the rightful heart of this family and the person who will carry the house forward. The house, I said softly. Yes. It is time to stop fighting reality. You have your company. You have your husband. Chloe needs a foundation. And the conservatorship? I asked. Nathan's head snapped up. I let the question come out small, almost ashamed. Do you still think that's necessary? Denise sighed. Ava, we only considered that for your protection. Considered. Not denied. Not shocked. Considered. Nathan underlined something on the legal pad so hard the paper almost tore. You have been under so much pressure, she continued. That company changed you. Nathan changed you. Money changed you. Your father and I would never want to take anything from you. We only wanted to make sure someone responsible could guide your decisions until you healed. Someone responsible. My parents had forged documents, stolen against my property, funded Chloe's gambling-shaped disaster, and smeared me online. But in Denise's mind, responsibility still meant control over me. I understand, I said. No, honey, I do not think you do. If you want this family to trust you again, you must show humility, not just say it. Show it. How? When Chloe receives the house, you congratulate her. You tell everyone you were confused and hurt. You explain that your accusations came from stress, not malice. You thank your father for protecting the family from your mistake. My throat tightened, not from surprise, from memory. I was 12 again, standing in the hallway after Chloe broke my science fair model because she was mad I had won. My mother told me to apologize for making Chloe feel small. I was 19 again, freezing on the porch, while Denise told me pride had consequences. I was 27 again, sending money after my father called me ungrateful for not paying for Chloe's failed boutique launch. Every stage of my life had included some version of this moment. Shrink yourself. Apologize for the wound they gave you. Thank them for the knife. I'll do it, I whispered. Denise's voice became almost tender. That is my girl. My stomach turned. That was my girl. Not when I graduated, not when I built my company, not when I paid off the house, not when I survived the wedding without them. Only when I pretended to surrender. After we hung up, I stood in silence for several seconds, still holding the phone to my ear even though the call had ended. Nathan set the legal pad down. You were perfect, he said. I hated how easy it was. His expression softened. That does not mean you are weak. It means I remember the script. Yes, he said. And now, you are using it against the people who wrote it. The next few days moved with a strange, almost surgical calm. Nathan received confirmation that the emergency property petition was moving forward. Iron Gate's position gave the court a concrete financial interest to consider, and the evidence showed more than a family disagreement. There were forged documents, a compromised loan, disputed occupancy claims, potential asset removal, and risk that records inside the house could be destroyed. Nathan's team did not ask for drama. They asked for preservation, control, and immediate restrictions until the fraud questions could be resolved properly. That mattered. Movies make revenge look like a speech. Real revenge, the kind that actually holds, looks like filings, timestamps, certified notices, affidavits, and people triple-checking page numbers at midnight. I signed what needed signing. I reviewed every statement for accuracy. I refused to exaggerate even when exaggeration would have felt satisfying, because my parents had already built their strategy on performance. Mine had to be built on proof. Marcus kept sending updates through his attorney when possible. Chloe was nervous but still arrogant. Victor had been bragging that Thanksgiving would settle the matter socially. Denise had invited more people than usual. Mrs. Whitaker was coming, Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Keith were coming, two of Chloe's investors were coming, a local councilman my father loved impressing was coming, several neighbors were coming, probably hungry for drama disguised as concern. They thought they were gathering witnesses to my defeat. At the same time, Marcus received confirmation that accounts connected to Chloe's shell company were under review. Not frozen yet, not rated, not anything instant or cinematic, just under review. But the phrase had weight. It meant the packet Nathan sent had landed somewhere real. Someone outside the family was looking at Chloe's invoices, offshore transfers, investor money, and gambling-linked payments. For the first time, the Sinclair version of reality was no longer the only one in circulation. The night before Thanksgiving, I stood in my closet staring at two outfits. One was the kind of plain dress Denise had requested. Soft gray, modest, forgettable. A garment designed to apologize before I opened my mouth. The other was a charcoal-tailored suit. Beautifully cut. Severe, maybe, but not cold. Not masculine. Not cruel. It looked like what I was. A woman who had walked through humiliation and come out organized. I thought of being 14 and forced to wear Chloe's old dress to a school banquet because Denise said buying me a new one would make Chloe feel less special. I thought of Chloe getting shopping trips before every party while I was told not to be materialistic. I thought of all the years my mother dressed me emotionally, too. Smaller, plainer, quieter, easier to explain away. I reached for the suit. Nathan watched from the doorway, tying his own tie. Denise asked for plain, he said. I slipped into the jacket. This is plain. His mouth curved slightly. Of course. For once, I said, looking in the mirror, I am not dressing to be accepted. Nathan stepped behind me and rested his hands lightly on my shoulders. No, I met my own eyes in the glass. I am dressing to be believed. On Thanksgiving morning, the court order arrived. Not everything we wanted. Not the entire war won in one piece of paper. But enough. Enough to restrict removal of property. Enough to preserve documents. Enough to recognize Iron Gate's standing and the disputed ownership issues. Enough to authorize immediate service and controlled enforcement if the occupants refused compliance. I placed the order in a slim folder and slid it into my purse. Then I looked at Nathan. They invited me to sit in the corner and watch my sister take my house, I said. He opened the door, and I walked out with a court order in my purse. By the time we reached the street, the house looked like something out of a holiday lifestyle campaign. Every window glowed. Warm gold light spilled over the porch, across the manicured lawn, and onto the curved driveway where a valet stand had been set up beneath a white canopy. Someone had wrapped the columns in fresh garland and tied them with velvet ribbon. Through the front windows, I could see the dining room chandelier blazing over a table long enough for a political fundraiser. My house had never looked more like my mother's dream. That was what made my stomach twist. Denise had always wanted a house that announced arrival. Not comfort, not love. Arrival. She wanted polished floors, heavy drapes, crystal glassware, arrangements too tall to see over, and neighbors who lowered their voices when they stepped inside. She wanted every room to prove she had married well, mothered well, chosen well. The truth that I had paid for the mortgage, the roof, the taxes, the insurance, The patio, the repairs, and half the furniture was not part of the design. Tonight, she had decorated my stolen life like a centerpiece. Nathan parked 2 houses down behind the security vehicle. 2 licensed private security professionals waited near the curb, both in dark suits, both calm, both hired for documentation and peacekeeping, not intimidation. One of them wore a small body camera clipped to his jacket. The other held an envelope containing copies of the court order, ready for service if needed. I looked at the folder in my lap. Emergency property order, Iron Gate Holdings assignment documents, preservation notice, fraud summary. All the paper in the world, and still my hands were cold. Nathan noticed. You can still decide not to go inside. I looked toward the house. Inside were relatives who had called me unstable, greedy, cruel. Neighbors who had believed my mother's tears faster than my documents. Chloe's investors who probably thought they were about to witness a gracious family transfer. A local councilman my father liked to impress. Mrs. Whitaker, who had once looked at me like I was a threat to my own mother. And my parents, who thought I was coming to sit at the small table in a plain dress and apologize for noticing the crime committed against me. No, I said. I am going in. Nathan nodded. He did not smile. This was not a moment for triumph yet. Marcus's message appeared on my phone. Front door unlocked. Smart TV still connected. Chloe's is live. Victor is starting toast in 5. My throat tightened. She's live streaming, I said. Nathan looked at the screen. Of course she is. Of course Chloe had turned Thanksgiving into content. Of course she had found a way to turn stolen property into a brand milestone. Of course, she was packaging my humiliation as proof that manifestation worked if you ignored enough laws. A second message came from Marcus. I am inside near the kitchen, waiting. I put the phone away and stepped out of the car. The cold November air hit my face, sharp enough to steady me. I wore the charcoal suit, no jewelry except my wedding ring, no soft gray dress, no apology costume. My hair was pinned back, my makeup was simple. I looked like the version of myself my mother always called severe when she meant difficult to control. As we walked up the sidewalk, I saw Denise through the dining room window. She was standing beside the table, wearing a cream silk blouse and pearls, one hand resting lightly on Chloe's shoulder. Her face was radiant, not happy exactly, victorious. She looked younger when she believed she had won. For one dangerous second, I did not see the woman who forged my reality. I saw my mother. I saw the woman who used to brush my hair before school when I was little, back before I understood tenderness could be rationed. I saw the hands that packed my lunches, the voice that read me picture books, the face I had searched for in every audience of my life. A small, wounded part of me still wanted to walk in and have her say, Ava, stop. I am sorry. I chose wrong. Then Victor's voice carried through the open side window. Family, he said loudly, is not about who earns the most or who chases cold ambition. Family is about loyalty, beauty, legacy. And tonight, we honor the daughter who has always understood that. Applause followed. The last piece of guilt inside me went quiet. Nathan looked at me. I opened the front door. No one noticed at first. The foyer smelled like roasted turkey, expensive candles, wine, and flowers. Coats were stacked on the antique bench my mother had once told me was a necessary investment before sending me the receipt. Laughter drifted from the dining room. Chloe's voice floated above it, breathy and emotional. I moved toward the sound. The dining room was packed. More than 40 people stood shoulder to shoulder around the long table and into the adjoining living room. Gold-rimmed plates sat beneath folded linen napkins. Imported wine breathed in crystal decanters. White roses filled silver bowls. Caterers moved quietly along the walls like staff at a private club. At the far end of the room, Chloe stood beside Victor with her phone propped on a small tripod, angled to capture her best side and the room behind her. The live stream title on the screen read, "Biggest Blessing of My Life." I saw comments moving fast. "So proud of you, Queen. Self-made energy. Family legacy looks good on you." Chloe dabbed at her eyes with the tips of her fingers, careful not to disturb her mascara. "I just want to say," she said, "that this house is more than a house. It is proof that when you believe in abundance, when you stay graceful through attacks, and when you refuse to let jealous people dim your light, the universe really does reward you." Several guests murmured approval. My father placed a hand over his heart. "Your mother and I could not be prouder," Victor said. "Chloe has carried herself with dignity through a difficult season. She has been attacked, lied about, and envied, but she never lost her softness." Softness. There it was again. The holy Sinclair word, the one they used to excuse Chloe and condemn me. Victor lifted his glass. "Tonight," he continued, "we recognize Chloe not only as the heart of this family, but as the rightful woman of this home. This house represents legacy, and legacy belongs to the child who honors family, not the one who tries to control it with money." People clapped. Some turned toward Denise, who was already crying softly. Mrs. Whitaker stood near the fireplace, hands clasped. Aunt Lorraine nodded with the solemn satisfaction of a woman watching gossip become ceremony. Uncle Keith filmed with his phone. Two men I recognized from Chloe's investor dinner whispered approvingly to each other. I let them clap. I let them finish. Then I stepped into the doorway. The first person to see me was Mrs. Whitaker. Her smile vanished. Then Aunt Lorraine turned. Then Uncle Keith lowered his phone. Silence moved through the room so quickly it felt physical. Chloe saw me last because she had been watching herself on the live stream. When her eyes lifted, the color drained from her face for half a second before she recovered. "Ava," she said, voice bright and shaking. "You came." Denise turned slowly. Her eyes moved from my face to my suit, and I saw the first crack in her performance. Not fear yet. Offense. I had disobeyed the costume instructions. "Ava," she said gently in a voice meant for the room. "Honey, we agreed you would not come in like this." Nathan stepped in beside me. Behind us, the two security professionals entered quietly and remained near the foyer. They did not posture. They did not touch anyone. Their presence alone changed the temperature of the room. Victor's face darkened. "What is this?" I looked at my father. For 33 years, that tone had been enough to make me explain myself. Not tonight. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. Chloe reached for her phone, probably to end the live stream, but her hand froze when comments began exploding. "Is that Ava? Wait, is this the sister? Why are there security guys?" Denise noticed the phone was still live and stepped smoothly into mother mode. "Everyone, please remain calm," she said. "Ava has been under significant stress. We invited her tonight because we hoped she was ready to heal." I looked around the room. Some guests softened immediately. Others watched me with the careful fascination people reserve for accidents on the highway. "She was allowed to attend," Victor said, "on the condition that she behaved." Nathan took a step forward. My mother smiled at him as if he were a rude waiter. "Nathan, this is a private family gathering." "It stopped being private when your daughter live-streamed it," he said. Chloe snatched the phone from the tripod, but not before several comments flashed across the screen. "Don't end it. What is happening? Why does he sound like a lawyer? Chloe's finger hovered over the screen. Keep it running, I said. She laughed once, thinly. You don't get to control my platform. No, I said. But you did invite the public into my house. The room went still again. Victor set down his glass with deliberate force. This is not your house. I reached into my purse and removed the slim folder. Denise's eyes locked on it. For the first time that evening, I saw fear. Not much, just a flicker. But it was enough. Nathan held out his hand toward Victor, not aggressively, just formally. Victor Sinclair Gitzel, he said, you are being served with an emergency property order, a preservation notice, and related documents concerning disputed title, fraudulent loan activity, and restricted removal of property from these premises. The room erupted. What? Fraudulent? Disputed title? Chloe ended the live stream too late. Nathan handed the envelope to Victor, who refused to take it. One of the security professionals documented the refusal. Nathan placed the envelope on the side table beside him. Service noted, Nathan said. Victor's face flushed. You arrogant son of a… Careful, Nathan said. The word was quiet. It landed harder than a shout. Denise lifted both hands, palms out, trembling beautifully. This is exactly what we feared. Ava, sweetheart, this is not how healing happens. No, I said. This is how evidence gets preserved. Mrs. Whitaker whispered. Evidence of what? I turned toward her, then toward everyone. For a moment, I felt the old shame rise. All those faces, all those people who had heard the stories, all those people my mother had prepared to see me as unstable before I ever opened my mouth. I wanted to sound perfect. Then I realized perfect was another cage, so I just sounded like myself. You have all heard stories about me, I said. Some of you repeated them. Some of you posted them. Some of you tagged my company in them. You were told I stole from my sister, abused my parents, and lost touch with reality. Denise whispered, Ava, please. I looked at her. You have had weeks to talk. Tonight I will. Chloe stepped forward. Nobody wants your drama. Then you should not have built a party around it. A few people looked down. Victor pointed at the door. Get out. No. This is my home. I opened the folder and held up the order, not according to the emergency order, not according to the disputed deed record, not according to the fraudulent home equity file, and not according to the entity that now controls the compromised debt your family opened using my forged signature. Nobody spoke. That was the first time the room truly heard me, not as an emotional daughter, as a creditor. Nathan moved toward the smart TV mounted over the living room console. Marcus appeared from the kitchen doorway, pale but steady, carrying a small remote. Chloe made a sound like she had been slapped. Marcus, she hissed. He did not look at her. He looked at me. I nodded. The television switched on. A blue screen appeared first, then a folder. Then the first document filled the room in brutal, unforgiving light. The forged loan application. My name, my supposed signature, the date, my wedding day. Someone near the table whispered, Oh my God. Denise's face went white. Victor lunged half a step forward. Turn that off. Nathan stood between him and the screen. No, he said. I do not think we will. The victory party was over. The record had begun. The first document on the television was almost boring. That was what made it powerful. There was no dramatic music, no flaming headline, no red circle around my forged signature, just a loan application displayed in clean black text on a 70-inch screen above my mother's marble console table. My full legal name, my property address, the requested amount, $150,000. The date filed, my wedding day. Then Nathan enlarged the signature block. A murmur moved through the room. I did not speak right away. I let them look. For years, my mother had counted on emotion. She could cry faster than I could explain. She could make her voice tremble before I could find the right document. She could turn a room against me with one tissue and one sentence about how worried she was. But paper does not cry. Paper waits. Mrs. Whitaker stepped closer to the screen. Her face had gone pale under her careful makeup. "Denise," she said softly, "you told us Ava took the money herself." My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "Eleanor, please, this is being taken completely out of context." "What context makes a forged signature acceptable?" I asked. Victor pointed at me. "You have not proven it is forged." Nathan clicked to the next slide. On the left was the loan signature. On the right were 3 known signatures from my passport renewal, business filings, and a notarized corporate document. The differences were obvious even to people who were not handwriting experts. The angle was wrong, the pressure was wrong, the rhythm was wrong. Whoever signed that page copied the shape of my name, but not the way I moved through it. I looked at my father. "You practiced from old documents, didn't you?" His jaw flexed. "Do not accuse me in my own home." Marcus spoke for the first time from beside the television. "You saved 3 versions of the practice sheet in the shared office scan folder." Victor's head snapped toward him. The room inhaled at once. Chloe hissed, "Marcus, shut up!" He did not even look at her. Nathan opened another file. This one showed a scanned sheet of paper with my name written over and over in different attempts. Some too tight, some too wide, some crossed out. At the bottom, in my father's blocky handwriting, were the words, "Good enough." Aunt Lorraine covered her mouth. Uncle Keith muttered, "Jesus." Denise's eyes filled with tears, but this time the tears seemed confused. They had entered a room where they were not automatically in charge. "This is private family material," she said. "No," I said. "This is evidence." Chloe pushed through the guest toward Marcus. "You had no right." Marcus finally faced her. "You gave me the right when you asked me to clean the shared cloud because your dad was worried about storage space. You betrayed me." His expression did not change. "You were stealing from your sister. I was surviving." "No," he said. "You were gambling." The word landed like a dropped plate. One of the investors near the dining table straightened. "Gambling?" Chloe looked at him too quickly. "That is not true." Nathan opened the next folder. The screen showed wire transfer records, payment processor statements, and a chain of transactions leading from the fraudulent home equity funds through a shell consulting account and into offshore crypto gambling wallets. Marcus had organized it so cleanly that even the people who wanted not to understand began understanding anyway. "This is a summary," Nathan said, calm and precise. "The complete records have already been preserved and provided through proper legal channels." The investor's face darkened. "Chloe, what is this?" She laughed, but the sound broke in the middle. "It is nothing. It is accounting. Ava is trying to make normal business transactions look criminal because she is jealous." "Those are my funds," the investor said. "That vendor account was in the pitch deck." Marcus clicked to another file. Fake invoices appeared next. Brand strategy consulting, luxury audience development, influencer conversion analysis. The vendor addresses matched mail drops. The payments moved out almost immediately. Some went to rented clothing, staged luxury shoots, and bought followers. Some went to gambling platforms. Some went to cover old debts. The investor turned fully toward Chloe. "Did you use investor money to gamble?" Chloe's face twisted. I built visibility. That is what you invested in. That is not an answer. It is my company. No, Marcus said quietly. It is a funnel. Victor slammed his hand onto the dining table. Glasses jumped. Enough. Nathan turned slightly toward him. I agree. It is enough. Then he clicked to the next page. It showed the suspicious deed transfer. My name as grantor, Chloe's name as recipient, a notarization page with a stamp from a notary I had never met, a date from the month before Thanksgiving. I felt the room shift again. People were no longer watching a family argument. They were watching a structure collapse. Mrs. Whitaker looked at Denise. You said Ava willingly gave Chloe the house. Denise's voice shook. She did. Emotionally, she did. Ava always knew this house was meant to stay with family. I paid for it, I said. My mother turned toward me, and for a second her public mask slipped completely. You paid because you could, she snapped. Do you have any idea what it was like, having a daughter who made everyone think we were failures? There it was. Not concern. Not love. Not confusion. Resentment. The whole room heard it. I looked at her and felt something inside me settle. All those years, I said, you did not hate that I was cold. You hated that I was useful and independent enough to leave. Denise's mouth opened, then closed. Chloe lunged toward the TV. She shoved past Marcus and reached for the remote. One of the security professionals stepped forward, not touching her, simply blocking the screen with his body. Ma'am, he said, please step back. Chloe screamed, this is illegal. This is harassment. She is ruining my life because she cannot stand that people love me. Her phone was still in her hand. Even though she had ended the live stream, notifications kept flashing across the screen. Comments, messages, calls, clips already shared. People had seen enough to know something was wrong. She looked down and realized it. Her face changed from rage to panic. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Chloe stared at it. What is that? Divorce papers, he said. The room froze all over again. Chloe laughed like she had misheard him. You are not serious. I filed last week. You cannot do that at Thanksgiving. I can do it anywhere service is valid. Her eyes went wild. You are nothing without me. Marcus looked around the room. For the first time since I had known him, he did not look small. You all thought I was fixing your Wi-Fi, he said. I was preserving your evidence. Victor's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Marcus held the papers out. Chloe slapped them from his hand. They mean nothing, she spat. They were already filed, Marcus said. You can tear the paper. You cannot tear up the filing. That line broke something in the room. Not loudly, not dramatically, but everyone understood that Marcus was not a prop anymore. Chloe bent to snatch up the papers and ripped them twice, 3 times, shaking so hard the pieces scattered across the polished floor. Her designer dress rustled as she crouched among the fragments of her marriage, her brand, her story. Then 2 phones rang at once. One investor stepped into the hall to call his attorney. Another moved toward the window, speaking in a low, urgent voice. Aunt Lorraine began whispering to Uncle Keith, no longer about me, but about whether their names appeared on any documents. Mrs. Whitaker had backed away from Denise as if lies might stain. My mother saw it. She saw the room leaving her. So she did what she had always done. She fell. Not hard, not dangerously, just enough to make a scene. Her knees buckled, and she slid toward the floor with one hand pressed to her heart. Ava, she sobbed. How can you do this to your mother? No one rushed fast enough. That was how I knew everything had changed. A month earlier, half the room would have surrounded her. Someone would have brought water. Someone would have glared at me. Someone would have said I should be ashamed. This time, people looked at the screen. I walked toward her slowly. She reached for my hand. Please, we are family. I looked down at her. When I was 18, my mother had not fallen to her knees. She had stood straight in the doorway while I cried on the porch in the cold, begging her to let me back in. She had said, "The real world will not comfort you just because you are upset." I remembered every word. "You made me homeless once," I said softly. Her sob hitched. The room became very still. "I was a teenager," I continued. "I had nowhere to go. You locked me out because I would not give Chloe my scholarship money. You told me the real world had no mercy." Denise whispered, "That is not what happened." "Yes," I said, "it is." I looked around the room. She turned that into a story about my mental instability. She put it in a conservatorship draft. She tried to use the night she abandoned me as proof that I could not manage my own life. Mrs. Whitaker's hand rose to her mouth. Denise's tears had stopped. That was the strangest part. When there was no audience left willing to obey them, the tears dried faster than they came. Victor moved. It happened so quickly that, later, I only remembered pieces. His chair scraping, the glint of silver from the carving station. Marcus taking one step back. Victor shouting, "You little parasite!" Then he had the carving knife in his hand, not raised high like a movie villain, low, ugly, real. He lunged toward Marcus. Nathan moved before I even screamed. He caught Victor's wrist with both hands and drove it down toward the table. The knife clattered against a platter and slid across the linen, leaving a streak of gravy like blood. One security professional grabbed Victor from behind. The other moved guests back with a firm, repeated command. "Step away! Everyone, step away!" Chloe screamed. Denise screamed louder. Victor thrashed, cursing, his face purple with rage. That was when the police arrived. Mrs. Whitaker had called them sometime after the first documents appeared. She told me later she did not know what else to do. At the time, I only heard the sirens cut through the room and felt the world tilt toward reality. 2 officers entered through the front door. The older one stopped when he saw me. For a moment, all the noise fell away. "Ava Sinclair?" he said. I stared at him. He was older now, gray at the temples, heavier around the eyes. But I knew that voice. "Officer Hayes?" His expression changed. I was 16 again, sitting in the back of a patrol car outside a 24-hour diner, shivering in a hoodie after running away for one night because Chloe had broken my laptop and my father said I probably provoked her. Officer Daniel Hayes had found me with $6 and a dead phone. He had bought me hot chocolate before taking me home. At the door, my mother cried and thanked him. My father said I had always been dramatic. Hayes had looked at me once before leaving, like he suspected something he could not prove. Now, 15 years later, he stood in my dining room with my father restrained beside a table full of evidence. His eyes moved from me to the knife, to Victor, to the security officers, to the court order Nathan held out. "What happened?" Hayes asked. Denise found her voice first. "Officer, thank God. My daughter brought men into our home. She is unstable. She attacked this family. My husband was only defending us." Hayes did not look at her. He looked at the knife. Then he looked at Victor. Then he looked back at me. "Ava," he said carefully, "are you safe?" No one in my family had ever asked me that in a room full of people. My throat closed. Nathan answered when I could not. "She is safe now. We have an emergency property order. evidence of forged loan documents, a disputed deed transfer, and an attempted assault witnessed by more than 40 people. Hayes took the folder. He read quickly, but not carelessly. Then he spoke to the other officer. "Secure the weapon. Separate witnesses. Nobody removes documents or devices." Victor started shouting again. "This is my house. She stole everything. That ungrateful—" Hayes turned on him. "Sir, stop talking." Victor looked genuinely shocked. That may have been the first time in his life a man with authority did not automatically take his side. Within minutes, Victor was in handcuffs. Not for every crime, not yet. Real consequences take paperwork, interviews, warrants, investigators, and time. But for the assault, for the weapon, for the immediate threat, there was no room left for interpretation. As Hayes walked him toward the front door, Victor twisted back toward me. "You did this!" he shouted. "You destroyed your family!" I looked at him. "No," I said. "I stopped funding its destruction of me." He spat something ugly before the door closed behind him. And then there were two, Denise on the floor, Chloe standing among torn divorce papers. My mother's voice became tiny. "Ava, please, you cannot make your mother homeless." I crouched in front of her, not to comfort her, but so she had to look at me. "You made me homeless," I said. "You taught me the real world had no mercy. I believed you." Chloe sobbed. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at the woman who had stolen my wedding, my house, my name, and almost my company. "I do not know," I said. "That is no longer my emergency." Under the court order, Denise and Chloe were allowed to collect medication, basic clothing, and essential personal items while security, police, and a court-appointed representative documented the process. They were not allowed to remove electronics, jewelry, financial records, storage drives, or documents. Anything potentially tied to the fraud, gambling, investor money, or property transfer stayed exactly where it was. Denise tried to take her pearl necklace. The representative stopped her. Chloe tried to grab her laptop. Marcus quietly said, "That device is listed." She looked at him with pure hatred. He looked back with peace. Outside, neighbors gathered despite the cold. Some filmed, some whispered, some stared at the woman who had once ruled their social circle as she walked out of the house carrying a small overnight bag instead of dignity. Mrs. Whitaker stood near the porch steps, phone lowered, face gray with shame. "Ava," she said as I passed. I stopped. Her voice shook. "I am sorry." I studied her for a moment. Part of me wanted to punish her, to ask why my mother's tears had been enough and my truth had not, to make her list every post she had liked, every rumor she had repeated. Instead, I said, "Do better next time someone quiet is being destroyed loudly." She nodded, eyes wet. When Denise and Chloe finally left, the house felt enormous, not peaceful, not mine yet in the emotional sense, just empty. I walked through the dining room, past the gold plates, past the flowers, past the half-carved turkey and spilled wine. I looked at the staircase where I used to sit, listening to my parents comfort Chloe after hurting me. I looked at the hallway where my mother once told me successful women were lonely. I looked at the living room where she filmed herself crying in front of furniture I paid for. Nathan came to stand beside me. "You okay?" "No." He nodded. "Fair." I walked to the front door. For most of my life, that house had been a sentence. A place I kept paying for because I thought obligation was love. A place I kept trying to earn my way back into, even after it had never truly held me. I closed the door. Then I locked the deadbolt. The sound echoed through the foyer. It was not revenge. It was the end of my sentence. 1 year later, people still ask me if I regret what I did to my family. They never phrase it that directly at first. They soften it. They tilt their heads and say things like, "Do you ever miss them?" Or, "Do you think things could have been handled privately?" Or my personal favorite, "But after everything, they are still your parents." I used to explain. I used to pull out the emotional receipts even when the legal ones were no longer necessary. I used to tell people about the wedding seats, the Porsche, the forged loan, the deed transfer, the conservatorship folder, the Thanksgiving live stream, the knife, the court order, the trash bags. I used to think if I explained carefully enough, people would finally understand why walking away was not cruelty. Now, I do not explain as much. That may be the greatest freedom I have ever known. I am sitting in my office at Northstar Data Systems as I say this, watching late afternoon light move across the Chicago skyline. My name is still on the door. My company is still mine. In fact, Northstar is stronger than it has ever been. We expanded internationally 6 months after Thanksgiving. We secured two major government contracts and a long-term corporate partnership that once would have made me call my father, desperate to hear him say he was proud. I did not call him. He would not have answered anyway. Victor Sinclair accepted a plea deal after months of investigation. The assault charge from Thanksgiving was only the beginning. Once investigators started pulling on the financial threads, the rest followed. The fraudulent loan, the forged documents, the identity theft, the attempted property transfer, the records connected to Chloe's shell companies. It all became something much bigger than a family dispute. He is serving time in a federal facility now. I wish I could tell you, I felt nothing when I found out. That would make me sound cleaner than I am. The truth is, I cried in my car for 20 minutes after Nathan told me. Not because I thought Victor was innocent, not because I wanted him saved from consequences. I cried because some part of me had still been waiting for a father who never existed to walk out of that man's body and say, "Ava, I am sorry. I should have protected you." That father never came. Denise filed for bankruptcy after the lawsuits, legal fees, and frozen assets caught up with her. She moved into a small rental 2 towns over, far from the neighborhood where people once competed for invitations to her dinner parties. The pearls were gone. The garden clubs were gone. The women who had called her elegant stopped returning her calls once her tragedy was no longer fashionable. She wrote me one letter, not an apology, a performance. She said she forgave me for the pain I caused while finding myself. She said a mother's love was eternal. She said she hoped one day I would heal enough to understand that she had only ever wanted what was best for the family. I read it once. Then I handed it to Nathan and said, "Do we need to keep this for legal reasons?" He said no. So I burned it in the sink. Chloe is awaiting sentencing on fraud, tax, and money laundering related charges. Her followers disappeared faster than they arrived. The clips from Thanksgiving lived online for months, not in the glamorous way she had always dreamed, but as cautionary content. People made reaction videos. Strangers dissected her fake invoices. Someone turned her self-made homeowner speech into a meme. I did not watch most of it. Revenge has a strange aftertaste when it becomes entertainment for people who did not have to survive the damage. Marcus divorced her. Fully, cleanly, quietly. At least by Sinclair standards. 6 months later, I hired him as Chief Information Security Officer at Northstar. Before anyone accuses me of charity, let me be clear. Marcus earned that role. He rebuilt our internal security architecture in 90 days, identified vulnerabilities 3 outside firms had missed, and created a fraud detection protocol that became part of our enterprise offering. At Northstar, Nobody calls him the Wi-Fi guy. They call him Marcus. Sometimes we have coffee together before everyone else gets in. We do not talk about Chloe much. We talk about systems, bad passwords, paper security conferences, and occasionally about how strange it is to be believed after years of being treated like background noise. There is a kind of friendship that does not need constant confession because both people already understand the language of survival. Aunt Lorraine and Uncle Keith started messaging me around spring. At first, it was sympathy. We always knew something was wrong with Denise, then admiration. You were always the strong one, then, inevitably, money. Keith had a medical bill. Lorraine's daughter needed help with rent. There was talk of family healing and turning the page. One message actually said, "After all you have been through, maybe helping us would show everyone your heart is still open." I blocked them. No speech, no explanation, no carefully worded boundary paragraph. Just blocked. The younger version of me would have felt guilty for days. She would have drafted a reply, deleted it, drafted another, asked Nathan if she was being too harsh, then sent money anyway just to quiet the shame. I miss her sometimes. Not because I want to be her again, because she tried so hard. She believed love could be earned through usefulness, and I cannot hate her for that. She was a child trained to mistake obligation for belonging. But I am not that child anymore. Nathan is still beside me, not in front of me, not carrying me, beside me. That distinction matters. People love to tell stories where a good man rescues a broken woman, but that is not what happened. Nathan did not save me from my family. He stood close enough for me to remember I had choices and far enough back for me to make them myself. Some nights, I still wake up with my heart racing when an unknown number calls. Sometimes, I still hear Denise's voice in my head, telling me I am selfish, cold, dramatic, ungrateful. Sometimes I still feel guilt in my body before my mind can stop it. Healing is not a courthouse door closing. It is not a father in handcuffs. It is not a mother losing her audience. Healing is quieter than that. It is buying groceries without wondering whose emergency I should fund instead. It is walking into my office and not flinching when someone praises me. It is letting Nathan love me without secretly waiting for him to turn the bill over and show me what I owe. It is spending Thanksgiving with people who ask what I want to eat and actually listen to the answer. This year, we hosted Thanksgiving in our apartment. Marcus came. My maid of honor came. A few close friends from North Star came. Officer Hayes even stopped by for coffee after his shift, which made me cry harder than I expected. Not because he was family by blood, because years ago, he had looked at a scared teenage girl in the back of a patrol car and suspected the truth before anyone else cared to see it. At dinner, Nathan made a toast. "To the family we choose," he said. For once, nobody turned that into a weapon. No one cried for attention. No one measured portions of love. No one demanded gratitude as payment for basic kindness. We ate too much, laughed too loudly, and left the dishes in the sink until morning. That night, after everyone left, I stood by the window and thought about the house. I sold it, not immediately. First, it sat empty for a while, going through inspection, legal cleanup, repairs, and all the slow practical work that follows a public disaster. When it finally sold, I did not feel grief the way I expected. I felt space. Like a room inside me had been cleared out and nothing ugly had been placed there to replace it. I used part of the proceeds to start a small foundation for young women leaving financially abusive families. Scholarships, emergency housing, legal consultations, documents replacement. The things I needed when I was 19 and standing on a porch in the cold, learning that not every locked door deserved to be reopened. I named it the Open Door Fund. Denise heard about it somehow and sent one message through a distant cousin. So now you help strangers, but not your own mother? I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, because it did not work anymore. That is what freedom feels like sometimes. Not joy, not triumph, just the moment an old hook touches your skin and finds nowhere to sink in. So, no, I do not regret what I did to my family. I did not destroy my family. I stopped letting them destroy me. Blood does not make someone safe. History does not make someone honest. A shared last name does not give anyone the right to your money, your mind, your home, your reputation, or your future. Family is not the people who demand that you bleed quietly so they can stay comfortable. Family is respect. Family is truth. Family is the hand that reaches for yours at the end of an aisle when no one else shows up. And if you have ever had to choose your peace over people who called their control love, I hope you hear me clearly. Walking away does not make you cruel. Sometimes it is the only way to stay alive.